My name is Cecile. The other day, my daughter surprised me by asking if I could teach her how to do makeup. She's still in elementary school, but it seems like girls these days grow up so fast. When I was her age, I was excited about getting cheap candies that came with toy necklaces or lipsticks from vending machines. It feels like just yesterday I was changing her diapers, and now she's becoming a young lady. It almost brings tears to my eyes. Today, I want to reminisce about a time when I was more into beauty. It was about 8 years ago. I had just finished staying at my parents' house for a month to prepare for giving birth and return home to my husband Tommy with our baby. I thought we were starting our happy life as a family of 3, but it turned out to be a family of 4. My mother-in-law, Melinda, who was supposed to be at her own house, was unexpectedly there to greet me. I thought my son might struggle on his own, so I moved in to help out. Maybe men have a hard time with daily tasks when they're alone. I thanked Melinda for taking care of my husband, and she seemed pleased. When I entered the house, everything was tidy and the air was fresh. It seemed like having Melinda around was a good idea. But then, a problem came up. My wedding ring, which I had to take off during pregnancy, was missing from the bedroom drawer where it should have been. I searched everywhere but couldn't find it. What was even weirder was that my special bag and shoes were also gone. These were items I hardly ever used and kept stored away. Feeling uneasy, I asked Melinda if she had tidied up the bedroom closet. She said she hadn't touched it. If Melinda didn't tidy up, then someone must have taken my things. I asked her if she noticed anything unusual while I was away. I asked both my husband and Melinda if they knew anything about the missing items, but they avoided making eye contact and denied that anything was wrong. They insisted that everything was normal. I tried to explain to them that my wedding ring, brand name bag, and shoes were missing, and it seemed like my bedroom had been burglarized. Melinda seemed surprised and asked if I was sure I had searched everywhere. In a panic, I nodded at her while calling the police on my mobile phone. When Melinda questioned why I was calling the police, I froze, caught off guard by her reaction. The police on the phone asked for details, and I struggled to provide them while feeling Melinda's disapproving gaze. In less than 10 minutes, 2 police officers arrived at our home. Despite Melinda's insistence that it was all a misunderstanding, the officers wanted to see the room where the theft occurred. It was unsettling to realize that both Melinda and I were supposed to be victims in this situation. The idea of strangers entering our home made me feel faint, while Melinda was red-faced with anger, insisting that we didn't need the police. Even my husband tried to calm me down, saying it was just a couple of rings and everything would be fine. Just a ring or 2? I snapped back. Those are our cherished rings that we bought together. They're irreplaceable. The police officer watched me closely and then asked me to show him the room where the incident occurred. He suggested that my husband and mother-in-law stay in the living room while we talked. As we walked to the bedroom, Melinda continued to protest angrily, saying it wasn't right to snoop around someone's home. But I couldn't help but think that if the house was in my husband's name, it was also my home. The older officer seemed puzzled by their behavior and asked if I had been living with my mother-in-law all this time. I explained that I had returned from my parents' home just today and discovered that Melinda had been living here while I was away. When asked if my husband had discussed letting his mother stay, I said I never agreed to it. Before I left for my parents' house, the missing items were indeed here. I didn't have proof for the ring and bag, but I did have a photo of the shoes. I was considering selling them secondhand. See, the save date on the data is exactly a month ago, right? The police officer said, narrowing his eyes as if he was starting to piece something together. Let's take a look at the room, he suggested. I led the officer to the bedroom and explained again where the missing items had been stored while he collected fingerprints. As he was doing so, he noticed a handkerchief on the shelf that was unfamiliar to me. What's that? He asked, pointing to it. I examined it closely and realized it wasn't mine or my husband's. I explained that the shelf was where we kept our favorite photos and paintings, and my husband knew I always kept it tidy. I had never seen that handkerchief there before. Feeling uneasy, I apologized for not noticing it earlier. It seemed strange that valuable items had gone missing while unfamiliar ones were appearing. The officer asked for permission to investigate further, and I agreed. To my surprise, he found a small camera hidden inside the handkerchief. For what? Espionage? I wondered aloud. The officer remained calm amidst my confusion and checked other drawers, different from where the missing items were stored. Eventually, he found a cable in a drawer near my husband's side of the bed. The cable fit the small camera he had found earlier, the officer remarked with a wry smile. The mother's behavior is a bit suspicious, but the husband seems fishy too. I struggled to understand the situation and asked, "What do you mean? Your husband might have installed this camera." The officer explained that they found a cable for playback and wanted to check the video. "Can I use that computer?" he asked, pointing to my husband's laptop. Confused but hopeful to uncover the truth, I agreed. The officer connected the camera to the laptop effortlessly, and the laptop recognized it, opening up the menu. He selected a command and chose a random file from a folder. To our shock, the video displayed our bedroom. I went with the officer to the living room where my husband and Melinda were waiting. Melinda immediately complained, but we had to undergo questioning, feeling like criminals. My husband was also in a foul mood, dismissing it as a fuss over nothing. "Enough. Whose fault is this?" I exclaimed in anger, slamming my hand on the living room table. "I'm still recovering from giving birth, and they made me run around and panic like this. How dare you act so brazenly after what you've done?" "I know everything now. Look at this," I said, taking the laptop from the officer and playing the video we had just seen. My husband and Melinda gasped as they watched themselves on screen, rummaging through the bedroom shelves, taking my ring and bag, and leaving. In the video, my husband was telling Melinda about selling the stolen items. "We can both have some fun," Melinda laughed, surprising me with her carefree attitude. "Who would have thought she had such sellable items?" she remarked. "It's hard to prosecute family living together for theft," she added, seemingly unfazed. "Mom, you're amazing, so knowledgeable, so shameless," my daughter chimed in. Despite their misdeeds being pointed out, they showed no signs of guilt. Instead, the conversation suggested they were proud of their cunning. I couldn't believe that the culprits were inside the house all along. My agitation and anger grew, while my husband looked scared. Melinda still denied any wrongdoing, despite being clearly seen in the video. "Okay, since you insist, let's watch this," I said, playing a different video. "Oh, come on. What about your wife?" Melinda exclaimed, trying to deflect attention. The video showed Melinda intimately engaged with a much younger man on a bed. She seemed unconcerned about her husband, referring to him as Rocky and expressing happiness about their affair. "Don't worry, I'll give you some money," she assured the younger man, wrapping her arms around his neck. It was as if she was trying to absorb his youthfulness. Though I hadn't seen it before, it resembled something straight out of a club scene. "Thank you, Melinda. I love you, you're so sweet," I said sarcastically as we watched the video. Melinda's alluring voice and actions on screen made even my husband look away, unable to bear it. The young officer seemed queasy, on the verge of saying, "Ew," while the older officer quietly scolded him. "Hey, stop it. Don't show such nonsense," Melinda yelled, her face turning bright red. My husband, perhaps feeling it wasn't his concern, seemed about to laugh at Melinda losing her composure. "Really, Tommy? You think it's funny, huh?" I challenged him, playing another video. As the videos played on, revealing my husband's affairs, the young police officer burst into uncontrollable laughter while the older one scolded him again. In one video, Ashley was stroking my husband's head, asking how many other women he was seeing. My husband responded with practiced lines, claiming she was the only one. The pattern repeated with the other women, each time promising gifts in exchange for secrecy. It was clear my husband had been leading a double life, lavishing gifts on these women. "You might have noticed he's making a huge loss buying brand name items for each encounter," I remarked bitterly. The only video showing Melinda's actions was that one, suggesting the recording button was accidentally left on, capturing the moment. Melinda not only stole my things, but also got caught in her own actions. Rest assured, it's not some peculiar hobby to watch Melinda's actions, or maybe it is. Melinda and my husband, embarrassed and exposed even to the police, were pale and slumped in defeat. But it wasn't over yet. Just as I thought this, the intercom rang. "They're here," I said. Melinda looked at me with a tired face, but I ignored her gaze and went to the entrance to welcome Bruce. When Melinda saw Bruce, she lost her words and screamed, "Seems like you were cheating in your son's house, huh?" I told him. No, it's not like that," my husband protested. "What do you mean it's not?" Bruce asked. "Cecile, could you play the video?" "With pleasure," I said, casting a cold glance at the bewildered Melinda. Bruce burst into loud laughter as he watched her flirtatious video. An old woman like this seducing a young man for money, aren't you ashamed? He joked. Melinda blushed furiously, her previously defiant attitude gone. That was funny. Let's see my sons too. Let's see how much he's grown, Bruce said, laughing while focusing on a particular part of my husband in the video. After watching all the infidelity videos, Bruce commented with a straight face, both mother and son letting young people take their money. Beyond disappointing, it's pitiful. Needless to say, Melinda and my husband would have preferred being laughed at. What we learned from my questioning was that Melinda accidentally found out about my husband's affairs. She kept it secret in exchange for using our house to meet her own lover. For Melinda, it was embarrassing to be seen with a much younger man, and her lover, lacking money and having a wife, couldn't easily find places to meet. For my husband, having the freedom to invite girls he met online without going out was cheaper and much more convenient. Thus, Melinda and my husband, keeping each other's affairs secret, turned this house into their paradise of indulgence, becoming accomplices. Their arrangement worked by one leaving the house while the other met their lover. Melinda never imagined the videos would be accidentally recorded. I'm sorry, Cecile. Bruce, I'll return the money. Do anything, please forgive me, Melinda and my husband begged, bowing their heads. Bruce and I exchanged glances and laughed. You'll do anything, right? Indeed, anything, we both said. Of course, they answered. Then let's divorce, we declared simultaneously, leaving my husband and Melinda in shock. You said you'd do anything, right? Let's get a divorce, I insisted. No, wait. Anything but that, please, Melinda pleaded desperately, but Bruce refused without hesitation. The divorce was not retracted. My husband, too, was crying and deeply apologizing, but I did not withdraw the divorce either. Thus, only hours after returning from my parents' home post-childbirth, my divorce was decided upon under police supervision. Later, I had my husband pay me the same amount as the sold items as compensation in the divorce trial. Additionally, I demanded double the standard amount for alimony and compensation for infidelity. When asked why double, I slightly intimidated them by implying that their mistresses might be married, and I could inform their spouses. This was mainly a bluff, as I didn't even know their names at the time. The threat seemed effective immediately, given the number of mistresses involved. My husband, terrified at the thought of being sued by each spouse, agreed to pay double the standard amount. Meanwhile, Bruce furiously obtained the lover's contact details from a crying Melinda and called him over. He informed the lover and his wife of the affair, leading to their divorce too. Both spouses demanded compensation from their cheating partners in the divorce trials. Though I promised not to inform the mistress's spouses, I never said I wouldn't demand compensation from the mistresses themselves. After extracting all the communication from my husband's smartphone, I contacted each woman to claim compensation for the affair, which they agreed to pay secretly. I was glad my husband had so many mistresses. It turned out to be quite profitable. But as a single mother without a steady job, I knew I could never have too much money. Turning the harm I suffered into financial compensation didn't erase the damage done, so with a substantial sum of money, I divorced my husband. 8 years have passed since then. Eventually, my husband ended up paying compensation to his mistress's spouses too. Their husbands, noticing their wives suddenly had a lot of money, grew suspicious. This led to the discovery of the affairs, resulting in some divorces. My husband, now overwhelmed with debt from the numerous compensations, was offered help by a certain woman, whom he thought was a goddess descended. However, she turned out to be a bad influence. He thought they were close to marriage, only to find out later she was already engaged to another man. My husband had spent what little money he had on a ring and dates for her, only to end up with a big loss and a broken heart. He never learns. Of course, I can't muster any sympathy for him, I thought to myself. Melinda, having proposed marriage to her affair partner after her divorce, was spectacularly rejected. Still, she didn't give up, repeatedly ambushing him on his commute until she was cautioned under a public nuisance ordinance. Naturally, that was the end of her relationship with her lover, who, as Bruce said, had only seen her as a wallet from the start. Well, everyone should be able to see it. Melinda was the only one who hadn't realized she was being used. It's a laughable tale. As for Bruce, after separating from Melinda and becoming estranged from his son, I worried about him being alone. But it seems the compensation money from the divorce trial sparked an interest in bonsai. Now, he's happily involved in a circle with people who share his hobby. That's a relief, though I didn't expect it. I looked him up, and sure enough, he'd even set up an SNS account. I've discreetly followed you, father-in-law, and me, honestly fed up with men. Marriage, no more, and still going strong. As a single mother, I relied on my parents until my child was old enough for daycare, then started job hunting, juggling child rearing. It took about a year, but I found a great company that's understanding of single mothers. There are others like me there, so although we sometimes work late, we're usually allowed to leave on time. I used to think single mothers had to work non-stop, but with proper allowances and just my daughter to care for, we live quite normally without extravagant luxuries. There's talk of a promotion when my child reaches middle school. I haven't decided yet, but I want to consider what will make my daughter happiest and my parents too. Despite everything, the joy comes from meals shared with my daughter and sometimes my parents. Oh, I did well to leave that man. Serves him right. He never even got to be called dad by my adorable daughter. My marriage ended in a crazy way, but as a parent I still hope my daughter finds a good person and has a happy marriage. Until the day she brings home a wonderful man, I'll do my best as a mother. So off to work again today.
The shrill ring of my office phone pierces through the mundane hum of my workday. I pick up the receiver, expecting another client or colleague, but the voice on the other end sends a chill down my spine. It's Everett, my estranged husband, and his tone is anything but friendly. "Mallory, we need to talk," he says, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I've made some investments that didn't quite pan out, and well, long story short, we've lost the house." I grip the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. "What do you mean, we've lost the house? How could you be so reckless with our home?" Everett scoffs, his true colors showing. "Oh, don't act so high and mighty. It's not like you've been contributing much lately. Maybe it's time for you to move back to that dingy little hometown of yours and live with your parents. God knows they could use the help at their age." Rage boils inside me. How dare he suggest I burden my elderly parents because of his mistakes? "Everett, you can't just make decisions like this without me. We need to talk, face to face." "Fine," he spits out. "Meet me at the house in an hour. Don't be late." The line goes dead, and I'm left standing there, the dial tone echoing in my ear. My mind races as I grab my purse and head out the door, barely remembering to lock up behind me. The drive to our once shared home is a blur. Memories of happier times flashing before my eyes. When I pull into the driveway, Everett is already there, leaning against his car with a smug look on his face. Well, look who decided to show up," he sneers as I approach. "Cut the crap, Everett. What the hell happened? How could you gamble with our future like this?" He rolls his eyes. "Oh, spare me the lecture. You're hardly one to talk about responsibility. When was the last time you even visited your parents? They're probably wondering if you're still alive." His words cut deep, hitting a nerve I didn't even know was exposed. "Leave my parents out of this," I hiss. "This is about you and your reckless behavior." Everett steps closer, his eyes narrowing. "No, Mallory, this is about you. You and your inability to be a proper wife. Maybe if you'd been more supportive, I wouldn't have had to take such risks." I can't believe what I'm hearing. The audacity of this man to blame me for his own failures. "You know what, Everett? I'm done. I'm done with your lies, your manipulation, and your complete disregard for anyone but yourself. I'm going to find a way to fix this mess you've made, and I'm going to do it without you." I turn on my heel and storm back to my car, my heart pounding in my chest. As I peel out of the driveway, I catch a glimpse of Everett in the rearview mirror, his face contorted with rage. But I don't care. I have a new mission now, one that will take me back to my roots and force me to confront the ghosts of my past. I will protect my parents from Everett's twisted games, no matter what it takes. As I merge onto the highway, the city skyline fading in the distance, I feel a sense of determination wash over me. I may be heading back to my hometown, but I'm not the same scared little girl who left all those years ago. I'm a woman on a mission, and heaven help anyone who tries to stand in my way. The winding road leads me back to the place I once called home, a small town nestled in the heart of America. It's been years since I've set foot here, but as I drive past the familiar storefronts and houses, memories come flooding back. I pull up to my childhood home, a modest two-story house with a well-manicured lawn. My parents have always taken pride in their home, despite the hardships they've faced. I take a deep breath and step out of the car, steeling myself for the conversation to come. As I approach the front door, it swings open, revealing my mother's smiling face. "Mallory! What a wonderful surprise," she exclaims, pulling me into a warm hug. I return the embrace, feeling a pang of guilt for not visiting more often. "Hi, Mom. It's good to see you. Is Dad around? I need to talk to both of you." Her smile falters slightly, sensing the seriousness in my tone. "Of course, dear. He's in the living room. Come on in." I follow her inside, taking in the familiar surroundings. The house hasn't changed much over the years, still filled with the same cozy furniture and family photos. My father sits in his favorite armchair, looking up from his newspaper as I enter. "Mallory, what brings you home?" he asks, a hint of concern in his voice. I settle onto the couch, clasping my hands in my lap. "Mom, Dad, there's something I need to tell you. It's about Everett." I relay the story of Everett's reckless investment and the loss of our home. I watch as their faces shift from shock to anger, their eyes filling with a mix of disbelief and disappointment. "How could he do this to you?" my mother asks, her voice trembling. "After everything you've been through together?" "I don't know, Mom. But I do know that I can't let him get away with it. I have to protect what's left of our family, and that includes you and Dad." My father leans forward, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean, Mallory? We're not the ones in trouble here." "But you could be," I insist. "Everett is a master manipulator. He'll stop at nothing to get what he wants, even if it means coming after you. That's why I need to make sure this house is secure, legally under my name." My parents exchange a worried glance. "Mallory, we appreciate your concern, but we can take care of ourselves," my father says gently. I shake my head, remembering the malice in Everett's voice when he suggested I move back home. "No, Dad, you don't know him like I do. He's capable of things you can't even imagine. Please, let me do this for you. Let me keep you safe." Tears well up in my mother's eyes as she reaches for my hand. "Oh, Mallory, we never wanted you to have to shoulder this burden. We only ever wanted the best for you." "I know, Mom, and I'm going to make sure that Everett pays for what he's done. But first, I need to make sure you and Dad are protected. Will you trust me to do that?" They both nod, their faces etched with a mix of love and concern. "Of course, dear, we trust you," my mother says softly. As we sit there, holding hands and sharing memories of better times, I feel a renewed sense of purpose. I may have lost my home and my marriage, but I still have my family, and I'll be damned if I let Everett take that away from me too. The road ahead may be long and difficult, but I'm ready to face it head on. With my parents by my side and a fierce determination in my heart, I know I can weather any storm that comes my way. The family lawyer's office is a stark contrast to the cozy warmth of my parents' home. I sit across from the attorney, a middle-aged woman with a sharp gaze and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listens intently as I explain my situation, nodding occasionally and jotting down notes. "So, you want to secure your parents' house under your name, correct?" she asks, looking up from her legal pad. "Yes," I reply, my voice firm. "I need to make sure that Everett can't touch it, no matter what he tries." The lawyer leans back in her chair, studying me carefully. "It's not going to be easy, Mallory. Everett sounds like a man who doesn't play by the rules, but I'll do everything in my power to help you protect your family." Relief washes over me. Thank you. I know it won't be simple, but I'm ready to fight for what's right. She nods, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I can see that. Now let's talk about the legal proceedings. We'll need to gather evidence of Everett's financial misdeeds and build a strong case for why you should be the sole owner of your parents' house. We spend the next hour going over the details, discussing strategies and potential obstacles. By the time I leave the office, my head is spinning with legal jargon and a mountain of paperwork, but I feel a renewed sense of purpose. Back at my temporary apartment, I pour myself a glass of wine and settle onto the couch, surrounded by boxes of my belongings. It's a far cry from the lavish home I once shared with Everett, but it's a small price to pay for my freedom. As I sip my wine, my phone buzzes with an incoming call. I glance at the screen, expecting to see my mother's name, but instead it's Everett. I hesitate for a moment before answering, steeling myself for whatever lies he's about to spin. "What do you want, Everett?" I ask, my voice cold. Mallory, darling, is that any way to greet your loving husband? He purrs, his tone dripping with false sincerity. I scoff. You lost the right to call yourself that when you gambled away our future. What do you want? I just wanted to check in on you, see how you're doing in that little hometown of yours. I hope your parents are well. It would be a shame if anything were to happen to them. My blood runs cold at his thinly veiled threat. Listen to me, Everett. If you so much as breathe in the direction of my parents, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life. He laughs, a low, menacing sound. Oh, Mallory, you always were a feisty one, but you forget who you're dealing with. I have more power than you can possibly imagine, and I'm not afraid to use it. I'm not afraid of you, I spit out, my hand clenching around the phone. I'm going to make sure you pay for what you've done, Everett. One way or another, you'll get what's coming to you. We'll see about that, he says, his voice turning icy. You have no idea what I'm capable of, Mallory, but you'll find out soon enough. With that, he hangs up, leaving me shaking with rage and fear. I down the rest of my wine in one gulp, trying to calm my racing heart. I know I'm in for the fight of my life, but I refuse to back down. Everett may think he has the upper hand, but he underestimates the power of a woman scorned. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my family and make him pay for his betrayal, even if it means going to war with the man I once loved. The next few weeks are a blur of meetings, phone calls, and endless paperwork. I throw myself into my work, determined to build a new life for myself and secure my parents' future. My colleagues notice the change in me, the steely resolve that now underlies my every action. Mallory, are you sure you're okay? My friend and coworker, Sarah, asks me over lunch one day. You've been working nonstop lately. I give her a tight smile. I'm fine, Sarah. Just dealing with some personal issues, but I appreciate your concern. She nods, her eyes filled with understanding. If you ever need to talk, I'm here for you. You don't have to go through this alone. Her words touch me, and I feel a wave of gratitude wash over me. Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot. As I leave the office that evening, my phone buzzes with a text message. It's from Everett, asking to meet at a nearby cafe. I hesitate for a moment, weighing the risks, but ultimately decide to go. Better to face him on my own terms than wait for him to ambush me. When I arrive at the cafe, Everett is already there, sitting at a corner table with a smug smile on his face. I take a deep breath and approach him, my head held high. Mallory, so good of you to join me, he says, gesturing for me to sit down. I remain standing, my arms crossed. What do you want, Everett? I thought I made it clear that I don't want anything to do with you. His smile fades, replaced by a cold, calculating look. You may think you've won, Mallory, but you have no idea what I'm capable of. I have connections, resources that you can't even begin to imagine. I lean forward, my voice low and dangerous. And I have the truth on my side, Everett. I know about your financial misdeeds, your lies and manipulations, and I'm not afraid to use that knowledge against you. He scoffs. You think a few pieces of paper can stop me? I'll bury you in legal fees, drag this out for years until you have nothing left, and then when you're at your lowest, I'll take everything from you. Your parents' house, your job, your reputation. I'll make sure you have nothing left to fight for. I feel a chill run down my spine at his words, but I refuse to let him see my fear. You're wrong, Everett. I have plenty to fight for. My family, my self-respect, my freedom from your twisted games, and I won't stop until I've made sure you can never hurt anyone again. With that, I turn and walk away, my heart pounding in my chest. I can feel Everett's eyes boring into my back, but don't look back. I know I've just declared war, but I'm ready for battle. The next few days are a flurry of activity as I work with my lawyer to gather evidence against Everett. We pore over financial records, track down witnesses, and build a case that even he can't ignore. But Everett isn't one to back down easily. He sends threatening messages, tries to intimidate me at every turn. I refuse to let him get to me, but the constant stress takes its toll. One evening, as I'm working late at the office, I receive a call from my mother. Her voice is shaky and I can tell she's been crying. Mallory, it's your father. He's in the hospital. He had a heart attack. I feel my world tilt on its axis, my breath catching in my throat. I'm on my way, Mom. I'll be there as soon as I can. As I race to the hospital, my mind is a whirlwind of emotions. Anger at Everett for causing this stress, fear for my father's health, and a grim determination to see this fight through to the end. I won't let Everett win. Not now, not ever. The hospital room is quiet, save for the steady beep of the heart monitor. I sit by my father's bedside, holding his hand as he sleeps. The doctors say he's stable, but the stress of the past few weeks has taken a toll on his health. I feel a wave of guilt wash over me. I should have been there for him, should have protected him from Everett's machinations. But I was too caught up in my own battles to see the toll it was taking on my family. As I sit there, lost in thought, I hear a knock at the door. I look up to see my lawyer, a grim expression on her face. "Mallory, we need to talk," she says, her voice low and urgent. I follow her out into the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. "What is it? What's happened?" She takes a deep breath. "Everett is trying to file a countersuit. He's claiming that you're the one who mismanaged the finances, that you're the reason for the loss of your home." I feel my blood run cold. That's absurd. He's the one who gambled away our future, not me. She nods. "I know, Mallory, but he's got a team of lawyers behind him, and they're going to do everything they can to make this stick. We need to be prepared for a fight." I clench my fists, anger coursing through my veins. I'm ready. I won't let him get away with this. We spend the next few hours going over our strategy, gathering evidence to refute Everett's claims. By the time we're finished, I'm exhausted but determined. I head back to my father's room, only to find Everett standing by his bedside. He looks up as I enter, a smirk on his face. "Mallory, what a surprise. I was just checking in on dear old Dad. Such a shame about his heart attack." I feel my temper. "Get out, Everett. You have no right to be here." He chuckles, a low, menacing sound. "Oh, but I have every right. After all, I'm still legally your husband, and as your husband, I have a say in your family's affairs." I take a step forward, my voice shaking with rage. "Not for long, you don't. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to make sure you never come near my family again." His eyes narrow. "You think it's going to be that easy? I'll drag this out for years, Mallory. I'll bleed you dry, and then I'll take everything you have left, including this hospital, if I have to." I feel a chill run down my spine at his words. "What are you talking about?" He smiles, a cold, calculating look in his eyes. "I have connections, Mallory, connections that go far beyond what you can imagine, and if I have to use them to get what I want, I will." I shake my head, disbelief and anger warring within me. "You're insane, Everett. You're not going to get away with this." He leans in close, his breath hot against my ear. "Watch me." With that, he turns and walks out of the room, leaving me shaking with fury and fear. I turn to my father, still sleeping peacefully, and I make a silent vow. I will protect my family, no matter what it takes. I will fight Everett with every ounce of strength I have, and I will make sure he pays for what he's done, even if it means risking everything I have left. I take a deep breath, steeling myself for the battle ahead. It won't be easy, but I know I have the truth on my side. And with my lawyer by my side, I know I can win. Everett may think he has the upper hand, but he's about to learn just how far a daughter's love can go. I won't rest until my family is safe, and Everett is nothing more than a bad memory. The game is on, and I'm playing to win. The courtroom is packed as I take my seat next to my lawyer. The air is thick with tension, and I can feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Everett sits across the aisle, his face a mask of smug confidence. The judge enters, and the room falls silent. The proceedings begin, and I listen as my lawyer presents our case, laying out the evidence of Everett's financial misdeeds and manipulation. But Everett's lawyer is good. He twists the facts, painting me as a vindictive wife out for revenge. I feel my stomach churn as he spins his web of lies, making me out to be the villain. And then it's Everett's turn to take the stand. He plays the role of the innocent victim, his voice dripping with false sincerity as he recounts the story of our marriage. "I loved Mallory with all my heart," he says, his eyes welling up with tears. "But she changed. She became cold, distant. She stopped supporting me, stopped being the wife I needed her to be." I feel my blood boil at his words. How dare he paint himself as the victim after everything he's done? But my lawyer is ready. She cross-examines him, picking apart his story piece by piece. She presents the evidence of his gambling, his reckless investments, his lies, and deceit. And then she plays her trump card. A recording of a phone call between Everett and his broker discussing the illegal insider trading that led to the loss of our home. The courtroom erupts in gasps and murmurs. Everett's face turns white, and I see a flicker of fear in his eyes. The judge calls for order, and the room falls silent once again. And then, in a moment that will stay with me forever, the judge delivers his verdict. In light of the evidence presented, I find in favor of the plaintiff, Mallory Chambers, the divorce is granted, and the marital assets will be divided in accordance with the prenuptial agreement. I feel a rush of relief wash over me, followed by a sense of grim satisfaction. I've won. I've beaten Everett at his own game. But my victory is short-lived. As we leave the courthouse, Everett corners me in the hallway, his face twisted with rage. "You think you've won?" he hisses, his voice low and menacing. "You have no idea what I'm capable of, Mallory. I'll make you pay for this. I'll make sure you never know a moment's peace again." I feel a chill run down my spine at his words, but I refuse to let him see my fear. "You've lost, Everett. It's over. Just accept it and move on." He laughs, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, it's far from over, Mallory. You may have won this battle, but the war is just beginning." With that, he turns and storms away, leaving me shaken and unsettled. I know I should feel triumphant, but all I feel is a sense of dread. I head back to my parents' house, where my mother is waiting for me with open arms. She hugs me tight, and I feel the tears I've been holding back finally spill over. "It's okay, Mallory," she whispers, stroking my hair. "You did it. You stood up for yourself, for all of us. I'm so proud of you." I nod, burying my face in her shoulder. "I know, Mom, but I'm scared. Everett's not going to let this go. He's going to come after us again, I know it." She pulls back, looking me in the eye. "And we'll be ready for him. We're a family, Mallory. We stick together no matter what." I take a deep breath, drawing strength from her words. She's right. We're a family, and we'll face whatever comes next together. But even as I try to push away the fear, I can't shake the feeling that this is only the beginning. Everett may be down, but he's far from out, and I know he won't rest until he's had his revenge. A few weeks after the trial, I receive a message from Everett. It's short and cryptic, asking me to meet him at an address I don't recognize. My first instinct is to ignore it, but something tells me I need to see this through. I drive to the address, a luxurious apartment building in the heart of the city. The doorman lets me in, and I take the elevator up to the penthouse floor. When I knock on the door, Everett answers, a smile on his face. "Mallory, so glad you could make it," he says, ushering me inside. "I have something I want to show you." I follow him into the living room, where a stack of papers sits on the coffee table. He picks them up, handing them to me with a flourish. "I think you'll find these quite interesting," he says, his voice dripping with self-satisfaction. I look down at the papers, my heart sinking as I realize what they are. They're the deed to my parents' house, signed over to Everett. "What is this?" I ask, my voice shaking with anger. "What have you done?" He laughs, a cruel, mocking sound. "Oh, Mallory, did you really think I'd let you win that easily? I told you I have connections, and those connections were more than happy to help me convince your parents to sign over their house." I feel like I've been punched in the gut. "You bastard, how could you do this? How could you manipulate my parents like that?" He shrugs, a smirk on his face. "It was easy. They're old, vulnerable, they trusted me, and now their house belongs to me." I shake my head, disbelief and rage warring within me. "You won't get away with this, Everett. I'll fight you. I'll find a way to undo this." He steps closer, his face inches from mine. "You can try, Mallory, but you'll fail, just like you always do. You're weak, pathetic. You never had what it takes to play in the big leagues." I feel something snap inside me. Before I know what I'm doing, I'm swinging my fist, connecting with his jaw with a satisfying crack. He stumbles back, his eyes wide with shock, and then he's coming at me, his face twisted with rage. We grapple, trading blows and insults. I pour all my anger, all my pain into every punch, every kick. But Everett is stronger, and soon he has me pinned to the ground, his hands around my throat. "You stupid bitch," he snarls, his face red with exertion. "You think you can beat me? I own you, Mallory. I own your parents, your life, everything." I struggle against his grip, black spots dancing in my vision. and then, just as I think I'm about to pass out, I hear a voice. "Get off her, Everett. It's over." Everett looks up, his grip loosening, and there, standing in the doorway, is his brother Nathan. "Nathan?" Everett says, his voice confused. "What are you doing here?" Nathan steps into the room, his face grim. "I'm here to stop you, Everett. I know what you've done, how you've manipulated Mallory and her parents, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." Everett stands up, his face twisting into a sneer. "You don't know what you're talking about, Nathan. This is none of your business." But Nathan isn't backing down. "It is my business, Everett, because you've used my name, my reputation to get what you want, and I won't stand for it anymore." He turns to me, holding out a hand to help me up. "I'm sorry, Mallory. I should have seen what he was doing sooner, but I'm here now, and I'm going to make this right." I take his hand, pulling myself to my feet, and as I stand there, bruised and battered but still standing, I feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I'm not alone in this fight after all. Nathan helps me to my feet, and together we face Everett. He's seething with rage, his fists clenched at his sides. "You're making a big mistake, Nathan," he growls. "You don't want to cross me," but Nathan stands firm. "No, Everett, you're the one who's made the mistake. You've lied, cheated, and stolen your way through life, and now it's time to face the consequences." He turns to me, his eyes soft. "Mallory, I know a lawyer who can help us. She's the best in the business, and she'll make sure that your parents' house is returned to them." I nod, feeling a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Nathan. I don't know how to repay you." He shakes his head. "You don't owe me anything, Mallory. I'm just doing what's right." We leave Everett standing there, his face twisted with anger and disbelief. And as we walk out of the apartment, I feel a sense of hope for the first time in months. The next few weeks are a blur of legal proceedings and paperwork. Nathan's lawyer is as good as he said, and she works tirelessly to build our case against Everett. And then, finally, the day arrives. We stand in the courtroom, facing the judge as she delivers her verdict. In light of the evidence presented, I find in favor of the plaintiffs, Mallory and Nathan Chambers. The deed to the property in question is hereby declared null and void, and ownership will revert back to the original owners, Eleanor and Walter Chambers. I feel tears of relief spring to my eyes. We did it. We won. But Everett isn't ready to give up. As we leave the courthouse, he corners us, his face contorted with rage. "You think this is over?" he snarls. "I'll make you pay for this, Mallory, you and your whole family." Nathan steps in front of me, shielding me from Everett's wrath. "Back off, Everett. It's over. You've lost." But Everett isn't listening. He lunges at Nathan, his fists flying. I scream, trying to pull them apart, but it's no use. And then suddenly, the police are there. They grab Everett, pulling him away from Nathan and slamming him against the wall. "Everett Chambers, you're under arrest for assault and battery, as well as fraud and embezzlement," one of the officers says, cuffing his hands behind his back. I watch as they lead him away, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. He's finally getting what he deserves. The next few days are a whirlwind of activity. My parents move back into their house, and I help them settle in. Nathan and I grow closer, bonding over our shared experience and our determination to move forward. And then one evening, as we sit on the porch of my parents' house, watching the sunset, Nathan turns to me. "Mallory, I know this might seem sudden, but I have to say it. I've fallen in love with you. Seeing your strength, your courage through all of this, it's made me realize how amazing you are." I feel my heart skip a beat. "Nathan, I don't know what to say." He takes my hand, his eyes full of warmth. "You don't have to say anything, just know that I'm here for you, always." I lean in, pressing my lips to his. And as we sit there wrapped in each other's arms, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. We've been through hell, but we've come out the other side. And now, with my family safe and a new love by my side, I know that anything is possible. Everett may have tried to destroy us, but in the end, he only made us stronger. And that's a victory that no one can ever take away. Matthew scrutinized the divorce papers and smirked. "Really, Lisa? You think you'll make it on your own? Without me, you're nothing." His words stung, but I wouldn't let him see it. I kept my expression firm, biting back the retort on the tip of my tongue. Instead, I took a deep breath and assessed the living room. It was a typical suburban home in a mid-sized American city. Everything was incredibly well organized, a stark contrast to Matthew's perpetual messiness. I broke the silence. "We'll see about that." Matthew laughed, tossing the papers onto the coffee table. "You've never been on your own? You think you can just leave?" "I'm not thinking, Matthew. I'm doing it." He shrugged, picking up his phone and scrolling through it lazily. "Go ahead. You'll come crawling back when you realize you can't handle it." Ignoring him, I moved to the kitchen, the one safe space left in the house. Memories of happier times cluttered my mind every time I stepped through the door. The kitchen was like a parallel universe compared to Matthew's chaos, the harmony amid discord. As I filled the kettle, I heard the low murmur of Matthew's voice from the living room. Curiosity got the better of me, and I tiptoed to the doorway. "Yeah, she's finally taking the bait," Matthew said, his voice muffled as he spoke into the phone. "Really thought she was something, but she's about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. Can't even keep up with the simplest tasks." My stomach churned. The person I had spent years supporting, laughing with, and loving was selling me short to his friends like I was some joke. Determined to keep my emotions in check, I focused on pouring the hot water over my tea bag, watching the steam curl upward. Matthew's voice grew louder. "She thinks she's got this big plan to leave me and start fresh. Honestly, it's pathetic. Once a quitter, always a quitter." The words cut through me, each one a tiny jab that threatened to bring tears to my eyes. I held my breath, willing myself not to cry. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I returned to the living room, teacup in hand. "You done making your little jokes?" Matthew hung up the phone, not even bothering to disguise his irritation. "Were you eavesdropping?" "I didn't need to eavesdrop to know what you think of me." He shrugged. "You're oversensitive. It's just harmless banter." "Harmless?" I echoed. "You're belittling me to your friends. They know the truth about you. Maybe you should start accepting it, too." He grabbed his jacket and headed toward the door. "I'm going out. Don't wait up." The door closed with a finality that echoed in our strangely silent house. I watched him leave, each step he took away opening a small window of relief in my chest. When the headlights of his car vanished down the street, I exhaled deeply, sipping my now lukewarm tea. This was my test, my chance to prove him wrong. For too long, I'd allowed Matthew to dictate the terms of my life, convincing myself I was nothing without him. But now, it's time to be something more. I walked to the living room, grabbed the divorce papers, and sat at the desk with a pen in hand. I felt a surge of determination, this time different. This time, it was real. I signed my name with purpose, each stroke of the pen a declaration of independence. "I'm not nothing, Matthew. I'm just beginning." I stared at the signature on the divorce papers, feeling a strange mix of resolve and uncertainty, but there was no turning back now. As I moved the papers aside, memories of our early days flooded back, uninvited. Matthew and I met at work. He was charismatic, effortlessly charming everyone around him. I was drawn to that magnetism, almost helplessly. Our romance was whirlwind, filled with grand gestures and sweet promises. Early on, we were inseparable. I left my job to support his career, convinced by his words and my own naive belief that it was for the best. Helping Matthew at work started small. A few emails here, a report there. Soon I was practically running his department from behind the scenes. He'd prop up the image while I managed the reality. Our professional dynamics evolved, except it wasn't evolution, it was exploitation. I recalled a recent conversation with one of his old coworkers, Cam. We ran into each other at a grocery store. "Hey, Lisa. Long time no see," Cam greeted, throwing some vegetables into his cart. "What have you been up to these days?" I forced a smile. "Oh, still helping Matthew with his work. You know how it is." Cam's eye roll was slight but noticeable. "Yeah, everyone knows how it is with Matthew. The guy's a legend in his own mind." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "He's always talking about how he runs the show. Calls himself a genius, but we all know who's really doing the work." I forced a laugh. "Oh, you know Matthew. Always boasting." Cam leaned in, whispering conspiratorially. "Actually, some folks say he takes credit for your work. Heard it more than once around the office." The conversation stayed with me, gnawing at my sense of loyalty and justice. Over time, Matthew's reliance on me didn't breed gratitude, but contempt. He treated me like his personal assistant, his condescending attitude growing more frequent. Each task I handled, every problem I solved, felt like another nail in the coffin of our supposed partnership. Days after that grocery store encounter, I was at Matthew's office, dropping off some paperwork he had conveniently forgotten. As I waited, I overheard snippets of a hushed conversation between two of his colleagues in the break room. "You hear about Matthew's latest screw-up?" one asked, chuckling. "Which one? Seems like there's a new one every week." "Guy's useless without Lisa," the other replied. My blood boiled, but I walked away quickly, pretending I hadn't heard. Pretending had seemed easier back then. Sitting now in my quiet kitchen, I realized just how deeply the facade went, how much I had buried to keep the peace. I could no longer ignore the extent of Matthew's disrespect. He had built his success on my efforts and derided me behind my back. I picked up my phone and dialed Rebecca, my lawyer and longtime friend. Her voice was a lifeline. "Rebecca, it's time," I said, my voice steady. "All right, Lisa. I'll start the paperwork. We'll get this done." Clicking off, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Empowerment. The next step in my journey was clear. This was just the beginning, and Matthew had no idea what was coming. I folded the last of the laundry and heard the front door slam. Matthew was home early, which was never a good sign. He stormed into the living room, his face flushed with anger. "Lisa," he barked, "get in here." I walked in, my hands still slightly damp from the laundry. "What's wrong?" He held up his phone, shoving it in my face. "Why did someone tell me you were snooping around at my office?" I took a step back. "I wasn't snooping, Matthew. I went to drop off those papers like you asked." "Yeah, and what else did you do? Gossip with my coworkers? Try to undermine me?" I leveled my gaze at him. "Undermine you? You don't need my help for that." He glared at me, his eyes darkening. "Watch it, Lisa. I can ruin you." "I've already signed the divorce papers, Matthew. You think you can still scare me?" He threw his hands up in the air. "Papers mean nothing. You'll crawl back when you realize you can't handle life without me." The doorbell rang, breaking the tense silence. I opened the door to find Cam standing there, looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Lisa, can I talk to you for a second?" "Sure, Cam. What's up?" Cam glanced past me at Matthew, who was still fuming. "I think you should know something. Matthew's been talking a lot of trash about you at work." Matthew scoffed from the couch. "Oh, here we go." Ignoring Matthew, Cam continued. "He says you're incompetent, that you can't handle anything on your own." My heart pounded. I know he's been bad-mouthing me. I've heard it before. Cam shifted uneasily. "It's worse than that. Matthew's been flirting with Karen Blake. More than flirting, actually." I looked at Matthew, who was trying and failing to act nonchalant. "Karen? Really, Matthew?" "What?" he said, feigning innocence. "She's just a friend." "Yeah, a friend. A friend who sends you heart emojis and late-night texts." I shot back, my voice rising. Matthew's eyes narrowed. "Don't pretend to be the victim here. You're overreacting. Karen's harmless." Cam stepped in. "Actually, I saw them together. They looked pretty cozy during that business dinner last week." I turned to Matthew. "Care to explain?" He rolled his eyes. "It was a business dinner. Get over it." I couldn't believe him. My mind raced, piecing together the lies, the disrespect, the sheer arrogance. I needed proof, and I needed it fast. "I'm done, Matthew. This marriage is over, and you know it." He smirked. "Good luck. You'll never manage without me." I stared at him, the man I'd devoted years of my life to, and felt only cold resolve. We'll see about that. As he stormed out, I thanked Cam for confirming what I already suspected. Knowing Matthew's true colors gave me the fuel I needed. I started gathering evidence, documenting everything. His texts, his meetings, even looking through his finances. I pictures of him and Karen at various outings. His secrets were unraveling, and with each new piece of information, I realized how little I actually knew Matthew. But it wasn't just about exposing his infidelity. It was about taking back control. I called Rebecca again, sharing my discoveries. She listened, understanding the full weight of what I had uncovered. "We'll use this, Lisa," she assured me. "This will solidify your case." I hung up, feeling a strange sense of calm. This was no longer about just leaving. This was about getting my life back from a man who had taken too much from me. As I put away my phone, I promised myself that Matthew's reign of manipulation would end, one way or another. I sat at my desk, the cold blue glow of my laptop screen lighting up the documents and pictures scattered around me. Each piece of evidence felt like a step closer to reclaiming my life. Matthew's texts, financial records, and photos with Karen all painted a clear picture. He had underestimated me, and that was about to be his downfall. Rebecca met me the next day at a quiet cafe. I spread the documents out on the table between us. "This is solid," she said, flipping through the evidence. "Matthew really let his guard down. He thinks I'm still that naive woman he married," I replied, my voice steady. Rebecca smiled. "But you're so much more than that now. This will help us build a strong case for your divorce." We spent the next hour strategizing, discussing how to use this evidence to counteract any claims Matthew might make. The plan was coming together, and I felt more confident by the minute. Back home, I knew the next step was to hit Matthew where it hurt. His job. I accessed the company's systems, leveraging my knowledge from years of running things behind the scenes. I started small, ensuring vital information was missing or incorrect. It wouldn't be traceable back to me, but the effects would be noticeable. Days later, Matthew came home, visibly agitated. "Work was a nightmare today," he grumbled, throwing his jacket onto the couch. "Really?" I asked innocently. "What happened?" "Some crucial data went missing. Then we discovered a bunch of errors in the reports. It's chaos." I nodded, suppressing a smile. "Sounds tough." "You have no idea," he said, rubbing his temples, "and I'm the one who's going to take the fall if this isn't fixed." That night I continued to sabotage his work, planting seeds for more chaos. The next week he came home fuming. "Lisa, everything's falling apart." He paced the living room, panic clearly etched on his face. "Every time we fix one problem, 2 more pop up." "Strange," I replied, barely containing my satisfaction. "Maybe you should look at your team's performance." Deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before his incompetence would be exposed. I just had to keep pushing. One evening, as Matthew was out, I sat down with Rebecca to finalize my plans. The divorce papers were one thing, but we needed the perfect timing to ensure everything would collapse simultaneously. "Focus on the next big project he's handling," Rebecca advised. "If we can create enough disruption there, the fallout will be catastrophic for him." I nodded, understanding the significance. This was more than revenge. This was my liberation. I'll make it happen. The big project was a merger deal Matthew had been bragging about for weeks. I accessed critical documents and altered key details, ensuring he wouldn't notice until it was too late. As the deadline approached, Matthew's panic grew. The night before the final presentation, he was frantically reviewing his notes. "Why isn't any of this making sense?" he muttered, eyes darting over the papers. I watched him with a calm, detached demeanor. "You're probably just tired," I offered. "Maybe sleep on it." "Sleep with this mess?" He stomped off to his study, leaving me alone in the living room. Early the next morning, Rebecca texted me. "Ready?" I replied. "More than ready." I took the divorce papers from the drawer, just every line of ink a testament to my resolve. Today, Matthew's world would crumble, and I would be there to watch it fall, stronger and freer than I'd been in years. This was my turn to rise. The morning light filtered through the blinds as I sipped my coffee, awaiting the inevitable fallout at Matthew's office. The merger deal was set to be finalized today, and I knew the errors I'd planted would come to light like a ticking time bomb. Around midday, my phone buzzed. It was Rebecca. "It's happening. I just got word from a friend at the company. The project's blown up in his face." I felt a surge of satisfaction. Perfect. I'll be ready. An hour later, Matthew burst through the door, his face a mask of fury and desperation. "Everything's gone to hell," he spat, flinging his briefcase against the wall. "The merger is dead. Dead! They're blaming me for the failures." I raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "What do you mean?" "What do I mean?" he shouted, pacing like a caged animal. "We lost crucial files. The figures were all wrong. They think I sabotaged it." "Maybe you should have double-checked everything," I said calmly. "It's your responsibility, isn't it?" He whipped around, eyes blazing. "You don't understand, Lisa. This could ruin me." I met his gaze, unflinching. "Maybe you should have thought about that before treating everyone, including me, like they're beneath you." His anger shifted to a sneer. "You think you're so special? Signing those divorce papers doesn't make you independent. You'll come crawling back, mark my words." I stood up, walking over to the desk and picking up the divorce papers. "Actually, Matthew, I brought them for you to sign. Given your current predicament, I'd say the timing is perfect. He laughed bitterly. You think these papers mean anything? You're nothing without me. We'll see about that. I placed the papers firmly in front of him. Sign them, Matthew. He grabbed a pen, his hand shaking with rage, and scrawled his name angrily across the bottom. I gathered the papers, feeling an overwhelming sense of triumph. At that moment, his phone buzzed incessantly with calls. He ignored it, glaring at me instead. You think this is over? You'll regret this. Mark my words. I stayed silent, my resolve unshaken. He stormed out, leaving the house in turmoil, his world crumbling around him. That night, I sat quietly in the living room, absorbing the moment. The weight on my shoulders felt lighter. The next steps were clear. I needed to finalize the divorce and reclaim my life in full. A few days later, the news broke at Matthew's company. He was publicly reprimanded, demoted from his high-ranking position. The scandal of the botched merger rippled through the company, leaving his reputation in tatters. Matthew's calls grew desperate, but I ignored them. Finally, he appeared at the door again, a shadow of his former self. Lisa, this is all a misunderstanding. We can fix this. You and me, like old times. I looked at him, seeing the man who once held me captive under his thumb, now reduced to pleading. There are no old times, Matthew, only what's next. And for me, that doesn't include you. As he stood there, dumbfounded, I closed the door on him, and that part of my life, for good. This was the end of Matthew's reign over me, but just the beginning of my true independence. I had torn down the walls of my old life and was finally stepping into my own, no longer confined by his manipulations. The future was mine, built on my terms. The news of Matthew's public demotion spread like wildfire. His once admired reputation crumbled, and the fallout from the botched merger left him ostracized at work. I could almost hear the collective sigh of relief from his coworkers. A week later, I walked into the office of David Walsh, my former boss. He greeted me with a warm smile, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Lisa, it's been too long. Sit down, let's catch up. I took a seat, feeling the weight of the past weeks lift slightly. Thanks for seeing me, David. Are you kidding? We've missed you around here, he said, leaning back in his chair. I heard about what happened with Matthew. How are you holding up? I'm doing better, actually. It's been tough, but it's also been a wake-up call. I'm ready to get back into the workforce. David nodded, his expression serious. Matthew never appreciated what he had in you, Lisa. You were always the backbone, and it's about time you got the recognition you deserve. Thank you, David. I have a lot to offer, and I'm ready to prove it. Good, he said, leaning forward. How would you feel about coming back on board? We need someone with your skills and experience. My heart leapt. I'd love that. I'm more than ready. As we discussed the details, a sense of liberation washed over me. This was the turning point I had been waiting for, a chance to rebuild not only my career, but my entire life. Back home, I started job hunting in earnest, sending out resumes and setting up interviews. I reconnected with former colleagues, each conversation a reminder of my capabilities and talents. The process was invigorating, a stark contrast to the stifling environment I had endured with Matthew. Meanwhile, Matthew's desperation grew. He called repeatedly, each message more frantic than the last. Lisa, please call me back. We need to talk. I can fix this. I ignored him, focusing on my own path. One evening, as I prepared for an interview, Matthew showed up at the door again, looking haggard. Lisa, you have to help me, he pleaded. I crossed my arms, standing firm. Help you? After everything you've done? You don't understand. They're transferring me to a dead-end position. My career is over. I felt a flicker of pity, but quickly smothered it. That's your problem, not mine. You made your bed, Matthews. Now you have to lie in it. His face twisted in anger. You'll regret this, Lisa. You think you're better off without me, but you'll see. You'll come crawling back. I shook my head, closing the door on his threats. Goodbye, Matthew. The next weeks flew by. I landed a prestigious role at a new company, my skills and resilience impressing my new boss. The sense of accomplishment was exhilarating, each day a reminder that I was capable and deserving of success. Matthew, on the other hand, continued to spiral downward. The transfer to a trivial position sealed his professional downfall, and his reputation was beyond repair. He tried to take legal action, desperate to hold on to the last shreds of his former life, but Rebecca and I were prepared. We had the evidence, the paperwork, and the resolve to see it through. In our final confrontation, he attempted to get Lisa back through legal means, but I revealed all the documentation. "You're finished, Matthew," I said with a calm finality. "I've moved on. It's time you do the same." With each passing day, I felt stronger, vindicated. I had not only reclaimed my career, but my sense of self. Matthew's downfall was complete, a testament to his own deceit and arrogance. As I flourished in my new role, his life continued to unravel. This was my victory, my liberation, and as I moved forward, I knew the future was mine to shape, free from the shadows of the past. I was on my way home from work, feeling blissfully tired after a fulfilling day at my new job, when I received a call from Rebecca. "Lisa, we've got a problem. Matthew is trying to contest the divorce. He's claiming you manipulated him into signing the papers." I pulled into my driveway, gripping the steering wheel. "He's desperate, Rekka. Are we prepared to handle this?" "Absolutely, but it means another court date. He's not letting go easily." "All right," I said, my voice steady. "I'll be ready." The court date arrived quicker than I expected. Matthew looked haggard, but his eyes were filled with defiance as he sat across from me. His lawyer stood up first, spouting allegations that made my blood boil. Miss Hartman exploited Mr. Hartman's emotional state, coercing him into signing the divorce papers, the lawyer declared, pointing at me with undue dramatics. I whispered to Rebecca, "This is nonsense." Rebecca nodded. "Let me handle this." She stood, her voice level but firm. "Your Honor, we have ample evidence that Mr. Hartman willingly signed the divorce papers with full understanding. Moreover, we have documentation proving his ulterior motives and abusive behavior throughout the marriage." Matthew scoffed. "She's lying. I was under immense pressure. None of this is fair." The judge eyed Matthew skeptically. "Mr. Hartman, your claims lack substantial evidence. Based on the provided documents and testimonies, it's clear that Miss Hartman has grounds for divorce." I watched as the realization hit him. His face twisted in anger. "You'll regret this, Lisa. Mark my words. This isn't over." I stood my ground, meeting his gaze with unwavering determination. "Actually, it is over, Matthew." The judge finalized the divorce, and I walked out of the courtroom feeling lighter, the weight of our toxic marriage finally lifted from my shoulders. A few weeks after the court ruling, I learned that Matthew had been transferred to a menial position in a remote office. His life had unraveled completely, a stark contrast to his former arrogance. One evening, as I reviewed files for a big project, my phone rang. It was David. "Lisa, I have some great news. We're promoting you to lead the new strategic planning division. Your work has been outstanding." I could hardly contain my excitement. "Thank you, David. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," he replied warmly. "Congratulations, Lisa. You've earned this." My career was thriving, and my life was finally coming together. That night, I celebrated with close friends, toasting to new beginnings and the strength to overcome past struggles. Meanwhile, Matthew's life continued its downward spiral. His arrogance had led to his downfall, and there was no one left to clean up his messes. He was left to face the consequences of his actions alone. As I looked around at my friends, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and triumph. I had reclaimed my life, my career, and my dignity. The shadow of Matthew's toxic presence had faded, replaced by the bright possibilities of the future. The final showdown with Matthew was over, and I had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever. The path ahead was mine to walk, free from manipulation and deceit. For the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of peace. The drama, the revenge, and the struggle had all led me to this moment, and I was ready to embrace every opportunity that came my way, confident in who I had become. I spent the next weeks settling into my new role, thus flourishing in a supportive environment that valued my contributions. Life was finally coming together. One Saturday morning, I was tidying up when the doorbell rang. Answering it, I was surprised to find Matthew's mother, Eleanor, and his sister, Nancy, standing there, looking somber. "Lisa, we need to talk," Eleanor said with an edge in her voice. I stepped aside, motioning them into the living room. "Come in." Once seated, Eleanor wasted no time. "How could you do this to Matthew? He's family. You're tearing us apart." Nancy chimed in, her tone accusatory. "You abandoned him when he needed you the most. What kind of person does that?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You both have no idea what I went through. Matthew's lies, his manipulations, and his affairs were too much to bear. Eleanor's face hardened. He's your husband. You made vows to stand by him. I held her gaze, and he broke those vows repeatedly. Why should I stay with a man who treats me like I'm nothing? Nancy crossed her arms. We've known Matthew longer than you, Lisa. He needs love and support, not betrayal. Support, I laughed bitterly, like how he supported me by belittling my efforts and taking credit for my work. Eleanor looked taken aback, but she wasn't giving up. People make mistakes. Families forgive. There's a limit, Eleanor, I said firmly. Matthew's arrogance and deceit are his downfall, not my doing. Nancy finally dropped her confrontational stance, seeming to remember who I was to Matthew once, before everything fell apart. What happened, Lisa? He wasn't always this way. I sighed, feeling a mix of old pains and new strength. No, he wasn't. But power corrupted him, and he lost sight of what we had. I couldn't save him from himself. Eleanor's face softened slightly. We didn't know it was that bad. But you must understand, he's still our family. I understand, I replied, caught, my voice softer but resolved. But I had to choose my well-being over his dysfunction. I hope you can, too. The room fell silent. Eleanor and Nancy exchanged looks, but said nothing more. They got up to leave, Eleanor pausing at the door. We'll always care about you, Lisa, but this is hard for us to accept. I know, I said, holding back a wave of complex emotions. And I appreciate that, but I had to do what was right for me. As they left, I felt a sense of closure. The confrontation had opened old wounds, but it confirmed my choices. I returned to my desk, looking at the projects awaiting me. My life was moving forward, and I could feel its pace quickening in ways that excited rather than overwhelmed me. Reflecting on my journey, I recognized my transformation. From a supportive wife lost in her husband's shadow, I had become an independent individual charting her own path. I had faced manipulation, deceit, and familial conflict, and had come out stronger on the other side. With a deep breath, I tidied up the remaining reminders of my past, consigning them to a box that would be stored away. My future was now full of potential, unclouded by the failures and betrayals that once held me back. I smiled, feeling a wave of contentment wash over me. The final ties to my past were cut. The world awaited, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. This was my new beginning, built on my terms. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a genuine sense of peace and purpose. I stared at the plate of food in front of me, Derek's words still ringing in my ears. Wow! Lo, I didn't think it was possible, but your cooking gets worse every day. I sighed, setting down my fork. Is it really that bad? I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. Derek scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Worse. I wouldn't even feed it to a stray dog. You can't cook, you can't clean, and you can't even give me a kid. What good are you? His words cut deep, piercing the fragile remnants of my self-esteem. I opened my mouth to respond, but his mother, Gwen, beat me to it. Now, Derek, she chided, though her tone held no real reproach. Don't be too hard on the girl. It's not her fault she's a failure in every sense of the word. I flinched, her insult stinging like a slap to the face. It wasn't the first time they'd belittled me, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. Living with Derek and his mother was a constant battle, a war of attrition against my very soul. As I cleared the table and set about washing the dishes, my mind drifted back to the countless times I'd tried to conceive, only to be met with disappointment and Derek's scathing remarks about my inadequacy. The words barren and useless echoed in my mind, taunting me with my perceived failures. Little did they know, I had recently discovered something that would change everything. While scrolling through social media forums, I came across a series of posts made by Derek himself, mocking my lack of culinary skills and expressing his desire for a divorce. He painted himself as the victim, a man trapped in a loveless marriage, seeking sympathy from strangers online. As I finished the dishes and retreated to the solace of my bedroom, I couldn't help but feel a sense of determination rising within me. For too long, I had allowed Derek and Gwen to diminish me, to strip away my sense of self-worth. But no more. It was time to take control of my life, to break free from the shackles of their cruelty. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to fight for my happiness, my dignity, and my future. This was just the beginning, the spark that would ignite a fire of change burning away the chains that had bound me for far too long. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of Derek's voice, already berating me for some perceived failure. "Leela, where's my clean shirt? I have an important meeting today, and you couldn't even do one simple task." I hurried into the living room, bleary-eyed and still in my pajamas. "I'm sorry, Derek, I'll get your shirt ready right away." Gwen clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Honestly, Lila, it's like you don't even try. No wonder my son is so disappointed in you." I bit my tongue, holding back the retort that threatened to spill forth. Instead, I scurried to the laundry room, grabbing Derek's freshly pressed shirt from the pile of clean clothes. As I handed it to him, he snatched it from my grasp, his expression one of disdain. "Took you long enough. At this rate, I'll be late for work." "I'm sorry," I mumbled, but he had already turned away, his attention focused on his phone. The rest of the day passed in a blur of monotony. I went to work, enduring the usual drudgery of my insurance job, only to return home and face the endless cycle of chores and criticism. Derek and Gwen seemed to take particular delight in pointing out my every flaw, no matter how insignificant. "Did you even bother cleaning the bathroom today?" Gwen sneered as I entered the kitchen to start dinner. "Of course I did," I responded, my voice weary. "Well, it doesn't look like it," Derek chimed in, his tone dripping with contempt. "But I guess I shouldn't be surprised. You're useless at everything else. Why would cleaning be any different?" I fought back tears as I turned my attention to the stove, determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Little did they know, their constant jabs were only fueling the fire burning within me, a fire that would soon consume their complacent cruelty. As the evening wore on, another source of tension emerged, Derek's gambling addiction. He had been losing money at an alarming rate, and the stress of his mounting debts was palpable. "You need to get your shit together," Gwen hissed, her voice low but venomous. "If you keep pissing away our money like this, we'll end up on the street." Derek slammed his fist on the table, his face flushed with anger. "Back off, Mother. It's none of your business how I spend my money." "It is when you're gambling away our future." Gwen shot back, her eyes blazing with fury. I watched the exchange unfold, a twisted sense of satisfaction creeping over me. Their dysfunction, their toxicity, it was all coming to a head, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the whole house of cards came crashing down. As I lay in bed that night, the weight of Derek's emotional and financial abuse pressing down on me, I made a decision. No more would I be the victim, the punching bag for their cruelty. It was time to take control, to exact my revenge and reclaim my life. The thought filled me with a sense of determination, a steely resolve that would carry me through the battles to come. Derek and Gwen had no idea what was in store for them, but they would soon learn the true cost of their actions. The breaking point came a few nights later, when Derek stormed into the house, reeking of alcohol and anger. "Where the hell is my dinner, woman?" he slurred, his words slurring together. I stepped out of the kitchen, wiping my hands on a towel. "It's almost ready, Derek. Just give me a few more minutes," he sneered, his eyes narrowing. "That's what you always say. Useless, just like everything else you do." Before I could respond, Gwen chimed in from the living room. "Don't talk to her like that, Derek. She's trying her best." "Her best?" he spat, rounding on his mother. "Her best is pathetic. I should have left this worthless sack years ago." Something inside me snapped at his words. Years of pent-up frustration, anger, and resentment came bubbling to the surface, and I couldn't hold it back any longer. "That's enough," I shouted, my voice trembling with fury. "I've had it with your constant abuse, your endless belittling. I'm not going to take it anymore." Derek's eyes widened, caught off guard by my sudden outburst. "What did you just say to me?" "You heard me," I continued, emboldened by my newfound courage. "I'm done being your punching bag, your emotional doormat. I deserve better than this, better than you." Gwen opened her mouth to interject, but I cut her off with a sharp glare. "And you're just as bad as he is, enabling his behavior, joining in on the insults. Well, no more." I turned back to Derek, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "I'm leaving you, Derek. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to make sure you pay for every ounce of suffering you've put me through." For a moment, Derek was speechless, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Then his expression twisted into one of rage. "You ungrateful bitch," he snarled, taking a step towards me. I stood my ground, unflinching. "Don't even think about it," I warned, my voice low and steady. "I'm not the same doormat you've been kicking around all these years." With that, I brushed past him, ignoring his sputtered threats and insults. I quickly packed a bag with some essentials and headed for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped outside, I took a deep breath of the cool night air, a sense of freedom washing over me. I knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt alive, invigorated by the prospect of reclaiming my life. I made my way to my brother Jason's house, knocking on the door with a newfound sense of purpose. When he opened it, his eyes widened at the sight of my disheveled appearance and the bag slung over my shoulder. "Lila, what's going on?" I steeled myself, pushing back the tears that threatened to spill forth. "It's over, Jason. I'm leaving Derek for good this time." Without hesitation, he ushered me inside, wrapping me in a comforting embrace. As I clung to him, the weight of years of abuse finally lifting from my shoulders, I knew that this was just the beginning of my journey towards reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my sense of self-worth. And Derek and Gwen, they would soon learn the true meaning of karma, the consequences of their actions rippling outward like a tidal wave, sweeping away the foundations of their smug superiority. After recounting the years of abuse I had endured at the hands of Derek and Gwen, Jason and his wife Emma were furious. Emma's eyes blazed with anger as she pulled me into a tight hug. "That bastard," she spat. "How dare he treat you like that? You don't deserve any of this, Lila." Jason nodded in agreement, his jaw clenched. "We're going to make him pay for what he's done. You have our full support, sis." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, grateful for their unwavering support. With their help, I knew I could finally break free from Derek's toxic grip. Over the next few days, we hatched a plan. First, I contacted a divorce lawyer to begin the legal process of separating from Derek. The lawyer assured me that with the evidence of his abuse and financial misdeeds, I had a strong case for securing alimony and a sizable settlement. Next, we turned our attention to building a solid case against Derek. Jason and Emma helped me gather documentation of his gambling debts, his online rants, and any other evidence we could find to expose his true nature. "We need to hit him where it hurts," Emma said, her voice steely with determination. "That money-grubbing prick needs to learn that there are consequences for his actions." It was then that I remembered Derek's estranged aunt, May. She had always been critical of his behavior, and she held the keys to the family inheritance. If we could get her on our side, it would be a devastating blow to Derek and Gwen. I reached out to May, explaining the situation and pleading for her help. At first, she was hesitant, but as I revealed the depth of Derek's cruelty and Gwen's complicity, her resolve hardened. "That boy has always been a disappointment," she fumed, "and to think his mother enabled such despicable behavior? It's unforgivable." With May on board, our plan began to take shape. She agreed to withhold the inheritance from Derek and Gwen unless they made amends for their actions, essentially leaving them financially destitute. As the preparations continued, I couldn't help but feel a sense of empowerment coursing through me. For years I had been the victim, cowering in fear and submission. But now the tables had turned, and it was my turn to dictate the terms of our engagement. Derek and Gwen had no idea what was coming, but they would soon learn the true price of their cruelty. With each step we took, I could feel the weight of their oppression lifting, replaced by a newfound strength and determination. This was more than just revenge, it was a reclamation of my dignity, a declaration that I would no longer be defined by their abuse. I was taking back control of my life, and nothing would stand in my way. As the plan solidified, I found myself growing more confident, more assertive. The old Lila, the meek and submissive doormat, was gone. In her place stood a woman emboldened, a warrior ready to fight for her rightful place in the world. And when the time came to confront Derek and Gwen, to unveil the truth and watch their carefully constructed facade crumble around them, I would savor every moment. They had sown the seeds of their own destruction, and I would be there to reap the bitter harvest, a testament to the power of resilience and the indomitable human spirit. A week after I left Derek, my phone rang. It was him, no doubt looking to smooth things over with empty promises and hollow apologies. I steeled myself before answering. determined not to let his manipulations sway me. "What do you want, Derek?" I asked, my voice firm. "Lila, listen," he began, his tone sickly sweet. "I think we've both said some things we didn't mean. Why don't you come back home, and we can work this out like adults?" I scoffed. "Work it out? You mean like how we've worked it out for the past few years, with you berating and belittling me at every turn?" "That's in the past," he insisted. "I've changed, I promise. Things will be different." I could practically hear the smugness dripping from his words, as if he expected me to come crawling back at the first sign of his supposed contrition. "Save it, Derek," I spat. "I'm not falling for your lies anymore. I want a divorce, and I'm not going to let you sweet-talk your way out of this." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when he spoke again, his voice was laced with barely contained fury. "Listen here, you ungrateful little wench. You're going to sign those divorce papers, and you're going to do it without causing any trouble. You got that?" I smiled, unfazed by his empty threats. "Or what, Derek? You'll insult me some more? Throw a tantrum like a petulant child? I'm not afraid of you anymore." He sputtered, caught off guard by my newfound defiance. "You'll regret this, Lila. Mark my words, I'll make your life a living hell." "I doubt that," I replied coolly. "In fact, I think it's going to be the other way around. You and your mother are going to pay for every ounce of pain and humiliation you've put me through." With that, I ended the call, a sense of triumph surging through me. The old Derek, with his empty bravado and hollow threats, no longer held any power over me. Over the next few days, Jason, Emma, May, and I finalized our plan. We gathered all the evidence we could find, from financial records to social media posts, painting a damning picture of Derek's misdeeds and Gwen's complicity. As the day of our confrontation approached, I could feel the anticipation building within me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to strip away their false bravado and expose them for the cruel, vile people they truly were. We rehearsed the confrontation, going over every detail with meticulous care. I practiced my lines, my body language, determined to project an aura of confidence and strength that would leave no room for doubt. Finally, the day arrived. I took a deep breath, steeling my nerves as I approached the house I had once called home. Even from the outside, I could sense an uneasy cleanliness, as if Derek had already moved on and brought his mistress in before our separation was finalized. As I stepped inside, the stale air hit me like a slap in the face, a reminder of the oppressive atmosphere that had once permeated these walls. But now the tables had turned, and it was my turn to dictate the terms of our engagement. Derek and Gwen sat in the living room, their expressions a mix of surprise and contempt. Before they could utter a word, I launched into my prepared speech, laying out the evidence of their cruelty and financial misdeeds with surgical precision. As I spoke, I could see the color drain from their faces, the realization of their impending downfall slowly sinking in. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, utterly blindsided by the depth of our preparations. And then, just as I was about to deliver the final blow, the front door opened and May stepped inside, her steely gaze sweeping over the room. "Hello, nephew," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "It seems we have much to discuss." The look on Derek and Gwen's faces as May entered the room was priceless. Their smug arrogance melted away, replaced by a mixture of fear and disbelief. They knew, in that moment, that the game was up. "Aunt May," Derek stammered, attempting to regain his composure. "What are you doing here?" May fixed him with a withering glare. "Don't play dumb with me, boy. I'm here because of the shameful way you've treated this poor woman." She gestured towards me, her lips pressed into a thin line. Gwen, never one to back down, tried to interject. "Now, May, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Derek and Lila are just going through a rough patch, that's all." "A rough patch?" May scoffed. "From what I've heard, this has been going on for years. Years of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and outright cruelty." I watched as Derek's face contorted with rage, his fists clenching at his sides. "Who have you been talking to? Lila's been filling your head with lies, trying to turn you against me." "Enough of your lies, Derek," I spat, stepping forward. "I have all the proof I need right here." I brandished a thick folder stuffed with documentation of his misdeeds. Gwen's eyes widened as she caught sight of the folder, and her complexion paled. "Derek, what have you done?" Before he could respond, I launched into my prepared speech, laying out the evidence of his gambling addiction, his financial mismanagement, and his vile online rants about me. With each word, I could see the confidence draining from their faces, replaced by a growing sense of dread. And that's not all, I continued, my voice ringing out with newfound strength. I have witnesses, people who can attest to the years of abuse I've endured at your hands. As if on cue, Jason and Emma entered the room, their expressions steely and resolute. They stood beside me, a united front against the crumbling facade of Derek and Gwen's lies. Derek's gaze darted from me to Jason, then back again, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Gwen, for once, was rendered speechless, her usual bravado nowhere to be found. It was at that moment that the front door opened once more, and a young woman stepped inside. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene before her, clearly not expecting such a confrontation. "Blake?" Derek croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman, Blake apparently, fixed him with a look of utter disgust. "You lied to me," she hissed. "You told me you were single, that you were ready for a committed relationship." Derek opened his mouth to respond, but May cut him off with a sharp wave of her hand. "Don't bother, Derek. Your web of deceit has unraveled, and we've all seen the truth." She turned to Blake, her expression softening slightly. "I'm sorry you got caught up in this mess, dear, but rest assured, my nephew and his mother will face the consequences of their actions." Blake nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I want nothing more to do with him," she spat, shooting Derek a venomous glare before storming out. The room fell silent, the weight of the confrontation hanging heavy in the air. Derek and Gwen sat frozen, their carefully constructed facade of lies and deception crumbling around them, and as I looked at their stunned faces, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication wash over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when the scales of justice finally tipped in my favor. With a deep breath, I gathered my strength and delivered the final blow. "Derek, Gwen, your reign of terror is over. I'm suing for alimony and restitution, and I won't stop until you've paid for every ounce of suffering you've caused me." Their reactions were priceless, a mixture of disbelief, anger, and fear that left me savoring the sweet taste of revenge. They had sown the seeds of their own destruction, and now they would reap the bitter harvest. As I turned and walked out the door, Jason and Emma by my side, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The shackles of oppression had been broken, and I was finally free. Free to live my life on my own terms, to embrace the future with courage and determination. And as for Derek and Gwen, their day of reckoning was just beginning. The aftermath of the confrontation was like a whirlwind, with events unfolding at a dizzying pace. As Blake stormed out, her face twisted with rage and betrayal, Derek made one last-ditch effort to salvage his crumbling lies. "You can't seriously believe her," he sneered, gesturing towards me. "She's just trying to turn everyone against me, to take me for everything I've got." I fixed him with a steely glare, unfazed by his pathetic attempts at manipulation. "Save your breath, Derek. The jig is up and you know it." Jason stepped forward, his expression thunderous. "Don't even try it, man. We have more than enough evidence to bury you in court." "Evidence?" Gwen scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "What kind of evidence could you possibly have?" In response, I tossed the thick folder onto the coffee table, its contents spilling out in a cascade of damning documentation. Financial records, printouts of Derek's online rants, even photos and witness statements. It was all there, laid bare for them to see. Derek's face paled as he rifled through the papers, his hands trembling with barely contained fury. "Where did you get all this?" he demanded, his voice rising in pitch. "That's not important," May interjected, her tone stern. "What's important is that we now know the truth about your gambling addiction, your financial misdeeds, and your despicable treatment of Lila." Gwen opened her mouth to protest, but May silenced her with a withering glare. "Don't even try to defend him, Gwen. You're just as culpable in all this, enabling his behavior and joining in on the abuse." Derek's eyes darted around the room, searching for any shred of support or sympathy, but he found none, only the cold, hard reality of his lies and misdeeds laid bare before him. "You can't do this to me," he snarled, his fists clenched at his sides. "I'll fight this, every step of the way. You won't get a damn cent from me." I couldn't help but laugh at his empty bravado, his desperate attempts to cling to the illusion of power. "Oh, but we will, Derek. We'll take everything from you, just like you tried to take everything from me." Emma stepped forward, her expression one of steely determination. "We're not just going after you for alimony and restitution. We're going to make sure you face the full consequences of your actions, legally and financially." Derek's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from his body as the weight of our words sank in. He knew, in that moment, that he had lost. That his carefully constructed web of lies and deceit had finally unraveled, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. Gwen, ever the loyal enabler, tried one last time to defend her precious son. "This is outrageous," she spat. "You can't just come into our home and make these wild accusations." But May wasn't having it. She turned to her sister-in-law, her eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. "Enough, Gwen. Enough of your blind loyalty and willful ignorance. It ends here, today." With a heavy sigh, May reached into her purse and withdrew a thick envelope. "This is my last will and testament," she announced, her voice ringing out with finality. "And as of this moment, both you and Derek are hereby disinherited." The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the sharp intake of breath from Derek and Gwen. Their faces, once so smug and arrogant, now twisted into masks of disbelief and horror. "You can't do that," Derek sputtered, his voice weak and hollow. But May simply shook her head, her expression unyielding. "I can, and I have. Consider it the price you must pay for your cruelty and deceit." And just like that, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Derek and Gwen, stripped of their ill-gotten wealth and inheritance, were left to face the harsh reality of their actions. Their world, once so carefully constructed on a foundation of lies and manipulation, had crumbled to dust. As I looked at their defeated faces, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph wash over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when justice was finally served, when the scales were balanced in my favor. And as I turned and walked away, leaving Derek and Gwen to wallow in the wreckage of their own making, I knew that this was just the beginning. The future was mine to shape, to mold into something beautiful and fulfilling, a future free from the shackles of their oppression. The road ahead would be long, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive, empowered by the knowledge that I had taken back control of my life. And as for Derek and Gwen, well, they would have plenty of time to reflect on the consequences of their actions, to learn the bitter lesson that karma has a way of evening the score. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional upheaval. True to my word, I pursued alimony and restitution from Derek with relentless determination, leaving no stone unturned in my quest for justice. With the mountains of evidence we had gathered, my lawyer made short work of Derek's feeble attempts at defense, his gambling debts, his online rants, and his emotional abuse. It was all laid bare for the court to see, painting a damning picture of his true character. Derek and Gwen, now disgraced and disinherited, could do little more than seethe in impotent rage as the legal system ground them down, stripping them of their ill-gotten wealth and privilege. With each court ruling in my favor, I could see the life draining from their eyes, the realization setting in that their reign of terror was truly at an end. And through it all, I stood tall and unwavering, bolstered by the support of Jason, Emma, and May. They were my rock, my foundation in the face of Derek and Gwen's increasingly desperate attempts to salvage their crumbling empire. "You'll regret this, Lila," Derek spat one day after a particularly devastating court ruling. "Mark my words, you'll never know peace as long as I'm breathing." I fixed him with a steely glare, his empty threats bouncing off me like water off a duck's back. "Save your breath, Derek. You've lost, and you know it. It's time you accepted the consequences of your actions." With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving him to stew in his own impotent rage. His threats were hollow, his power stripped away by the weight of his own misdeeds. As the legal battles raged on, I found myself slowly shedding the shackles of my past, the weight of Derek and Gwen's oppression lifting from my shoulders. With each victory, each hard-won settlement or ruling in my favor, I felt a renewed sense of strength and determination, a fire burning within me that could not be extinguished. And as the dust finally settled, the final judgments handed down, I found myself in a position I never could have imagined. Financially secure, emotionally liberated, and finally free from the chains of my toxic marriage. Derek and Gwen, on the other hand, were left destitute and disgraced, their once lofty status crumbling around them like a house of cards. May had seen to it that they were evicted from the family home, left to fend for themselves in the harsh reality they had so callously inflicted upon others. As I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by the trappings of my newfound independence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over me. I had fought the good fight, weathered the storm of their cruelty, and emerged victorious, a testament to the indomitable human spirit and the power of resilience. In the months that followed, I threw myself into my career with renewed vigor, channeling my newfound confidence and determination into every aspect of my work. It wasn't long before my efforts were rewarded, and I found myself promoted to a senior position within the firm, a testament to my skills and dedication. But perhaps more importantly, I began to rediscover the parts of myself that had been suppressed for so long. My passions, my dreams, and my zest for life. I took up new hobbies, explored new interests, and surrounded myself with people who truly cared for me, who supported and uplifted me rather than tearing me down. And as for the prospect of a new relationship, well, I wasn't closing that door entirely. But this time I vowed to approach it with wisdom and discernment, never again allowing myself to be subjugated or diminished by another person's cruelty or insecurity. As I stood on the balcony of my apartment one evening, gazing out over the twinkling lights of the city, I couldn't help but marvel at the journey I had taken. From the depths of emotional and financial despair, I had risen like a phoenix from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. And in that moment, I made a silent vow, a vow to never again allow anyone to strip me of my dignity or self-worth. I was the master of my own destiny, the architect of my own future, and no one, not Derek, not Gwen, nor anyone else, could ever take that away from me again. With a deep breath and a smile on my face, I turned and went back inside, ready to embrace the next chapter of my life with open arms and an unwavering spirit. The past was behind me, and the future lay ahead, brimming with possibilities and the promise of a life truly lived on my own terms. I sat across from Mark at our dining table, the evening light filtering through the windows, casting a warm glow over our cozy home. Everything seemed perfect, until he dropped those fateful words that shattered my world. "There's something you need to know, Emily." His voice trembled, and he couldn't meet my gaze. A knot formed in my stomach as I lowered my magazine. "What is it, Mark?" He took a deep breath, his eyes downcast. "We need to get a divorce." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the air from my lungs. "What? Why?" Mark's shoulders slumped, and he finally looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and resolve. "I've been in love with someone else for years. Her name is Heather, and she's pregnant with my child." Time seemed to freeze as his confession sank in. The man I had loved, trusted, and built a life with had been lying to me all this time. Tears stung my eyes, and a lump formed in my throat, making it hard to breathe. "How could you do this to me?" I choked out, my voice cracking with emotion. "To our marriage?" Mark's expression softened, but it did little to ease the ache in my chest. "I'm sorry, Emily. I never meant to hurt you, but I can't keep living a lie. I love Heather, and I want to be with her and our child." Anger flared within me, burning away the initial shock and hurt. "So what? Our 5 years together meant nothing to you?" He shook his head, his brow furrowed. "Of course they did, but sometimes love fades and people grow apart." I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the torrent of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "How long have you been lying to me? How long have you been sneaking around behind my back?" Mark's gaze dropped once more, and he fidgeted in his chair. "A few years," he mumbled. My heart shattered into a million pieces. The man I thought I knew was nothing but a fraud, a snake who had betrayed my trust in the cruelest way possible. In that moment, something hardened within me. I would not be a victim. I would not let this break me. Mark had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. "Get out," I said, my voice low and steady. "Pack your things and get out of my house." Mark's eyes widened, but he didn't argue. He simply nodded and stood from the table, leaving me alone with the wreckage of our once happy life. As I sat there, tears streaming down my face, I made a vow to myself. Mark would pay for what he had done. I would make sure of it. The next day at work, I felt like a zombie, barely able to focus on the tasks at hand. The weight of Mark's betrayal hung heavy on my shoulders, and I knew I needed to confide in someone I could trust. During our lunch break, I caught up with my friend and colleague, Laura, in the cafeteria. As we settled at a table, she immediately noticed the dark circles under my eyes and my somber demeanor. "Emily, what's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Mark wants a divorce." Laura's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? Why?" The words tumbled out like opening a floodgate of pent-up emotion. "He's been cheating on me for years with some woman named Heather, and she's pregnant with his child." Laura's hand flew to her mouth, her expression a mix of shock and anger. "That bastard," she hissed. "I'm so sorry, Emily. You don't deserve this." I nodded, blinking back tears. "I know. And the worst part is, he acted like it was nothing, like our 5 years of marriage meant nothing to him." Laura reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That's because he's a selfish prick who only cares about himself." Her words rang true, and I felt a surge of anger coursing through me. "You're right. He is selfish, and he's going to pay for what he's done." Laura leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening. "I'm not going to let him get away with this. He thinks he can just toss me aside and start a new life with his mistress? Not a chance." Laura's eyes narrowed. "What are you going to do?" "First, I'm going to hire a private investigator," I said, my voice steady and determined. "I need to know exactly how deep this rabbit hole goes. If Mark has been cheating for years, there's no telling what else he's been hiding from me." Laura nodded slowly, a sly smile spreading across her lips. "Good idea. We need to gather as much dirt on him as possible." "Exactly," I said, feeling a sense of purpose settle over me. "And then we'll use it to make sure I get everything I deserve in the divorce." Laura's smile turned feral. "That's my girl. We'll make sure that bastard pays for what he's done." As we finished our lunch, I felt a newfound resolve coursing through my veins. Mark had made a mistake, thinking he could walk all over me and discard our marriage like it meant nothing. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Later that day, as I sat at my desk, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I felt a cold sweat prickling at the back of my neck. Pushing through the discomfort, I made a mental note to schedule a doctor's appointment, just to be on the safe side. Little did I know, the real bombshell was yet to come. A few days later, I found myself sitting in the doctor's office, nervously tapping my foot as I waited for the results. The nausea and fatigue had only gotten worse, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When the doctor finally called me back, her expression was unreadable. "Well, Miss Anderson, the tests confirm that you're pregnant." The words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Pregnant? With Mark's child? The cruel irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. "Are you sure?" I managed to choke out, my mouth suddenly dry. The doctor nodded, a hint of sympathy in her eyes. "Yes, I'm afraid there's no doubt about it. Congratulations are in order, I suppose." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Congratulations? My husband just left me for another woman who's also pregnant with his child. This is the last thing I expected." The doctor's expression softened. "I understand this must be a difficult situation, but try to focus on the positives. You're bringing a new life into the world, and that's something to be celebrated." I nodded numbly, my mind racing with a million thoughts and emotions. On the one hand, the idea of having a child filled me with joy and hope for the future. But on the other hand, the fact that it was Mark's child, conceived during a time when he was betraying me with another woman, left a bitter taste in my mouth. As I left the doctor's office, I felt torn in two. Part of me wanted to embrace this new chapter, to focus on the love and nurturing that comes with motherhood. But another part of me couldn't shake the anger and resentment towards Mark, the man who had so callously thrown our marriage away. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of water and sank onto the couch, my hand instinctively resting on my still flat stomach. A million questions raced through my mind. How would I tell Mark? Would he even care? Would he try to use this as leverage against me in the divorce? As the hours ticked by, I came to a decision. I would tell Mark about the pregnancy, but not because I expected him to change his mind or come back to me. No, I would tell him because he deserved to know the full extent of the consequences of his actions. The next day, I steeled my nerves and called Mark, asking him to come over so we could talk. When he arrived, he looked uncomfortable, like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "What's going on, Emily?" he asked, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze with a steely resolve. "I'm pregnant, Mark, with your child." His eyes widened and his mouth hung open in shock. "What? How?" I couldn't help but scoff at his incredulity. "How do you think, Mark? We were still together when this happened, remember?" He ran a hand through his hair, his expression a mix of confusion and guilt. "But I thought, with Heather." I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Save it, Mark. I don't need your excuses or your pity. I'm telling you this not because I expect anything from you, but because you need to understand the gravity of what you've done." His shoulders slumped, and he nodded slowly. "I'm sorry, Emily. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Well, it did," I said, my voice hard as steel. "And now you're going to have to live with the consequences, just like me." As he left, I felt a strange sense of empowerment wash over me. In that moment, I knew that no matter what happened, I would be okay. I had the strength and determination to get through this, with or without Mark by my side. And if he thought he could just waltz back into my life and play the doting father, he had another thing coming. A few days after breaking the news of my pregnancy to Mark, I found myself pacing the living room floor, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Part of me still clung to the hope that this child might be the wake-up call he needed, that he would come to his senses and realize the mistake he was making. The sound of the doorbell pulled me from my thoughts, and I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. When I opened the door, Mark stood on the other side, his expression a mix of guilt and determination. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, brushing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. I crossed my arms over my chest, watching him warily. "About what?" He turned to face me, his eyes pleading. "About the baby. About us," I scoffed, shaking my head. "There is no us anymore, Mark. Aita, you made that clear when you decided to throw away our marriage for some fling." His face fell, and he ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Heather is not just some fling, Emily. I love her, and I want to be with her and our child." The words hit me like a physical blow, and I felt my cheeks flush with anger. "And what about my child, Mark? The one growing inside me right now? Are you just going to abandon us too?" He held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Of course not, Emily. I want to be a part of this child's life too." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, how generous of you. You want to be a part-time father to my child while you play house with your mistress and her baby." Mark's expression hardened. "That's not fair, Emily. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Well, it did happen," I shot back, my voice rising. "And now you have to face the consequences of your actions." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "Please, Emily, let's not do this. Let's try to work things out for the sake of our child." I shook my head, feeling a surge of resolve coursing through me. "No, Mark, you made your choice, and now you have to live with it. I'm not going to let you waltz back into my life and play the doting father whenever it's convenient for you." His shoulders slumped, and I could see the defeat in his eyes. "Emily, please, get out," I said, my voice low and steady. "Get out of my house, and don't come back unless it's to discuss the divorce proceedings." He opened his mouth as if to argue, but one look at the determination on my face must have convinced him it was futile. With a heavy sigh, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me alone with the weight of my decision. As the days passed, I found myself hardening my resolve further. Mark had made his bed, and now he would have to lie in it. I wouldn't allow him to string me along or use the pregnancy as leverage in the divorce. No, I would take control of the situation and ensure that I got everything I deserved, both for myself and for my child. With Laura's help, I started gathering evidence of Mark's infidelity, documenting every lie, every betrayal, and every instance of his deceit. I would make sure that when the divorce proceedings began, I had an ironclad case against him, ensuring that he wouldn't be able to weasel his way out of taking responsibility for his actions. As I sat in my home office, sifting through the mounting evidence, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. Mark had thought he could walk all over me, discard me like a used rag, and move on to greener pastures. But he had underestimated my strength, my resilience, and my determination to see justice done. I would make sure that he paid for what he had done in every possible way. And in the end, I would be the one standing tall, with a secure future for myself and my child, while he was left to wallow in the ruins of his own making. With the evidence of Mark's infidelity mounting, I knew it was time to take the next step in my plan for revenge. I called Laura over to my home office, and we pored over the documents and recordings I had gathered, plotting our next move. "This is good, Emily," Laura said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Really good. With all of this, you'll have a solid case in the divorce proceedings." I nodded, a grim smile tugging at my lips. "That's the plan. Mark thinks he can just toss me aside and start a new life with his mistress. He's got another thing coming." Laura leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. "Are you sure you want to go through with this, though? Divorces can get really messy, especially when there's a kid involved." I met her gaze, my resolve unwavering. "I'm sure. Mark made his choice, and now he has to face the consequences. I'm not going to let him waltz back into my life and play the doting father whenever it's convenient for him." Laura nodded slowly, a sly smile spreading across her face. "All right, then. Let's make sure he pays for what he's done." With Laura's support and the mounting evidence against Mark, I felt a surge of confidence coursing through me. But I knew that in order to truly secure my future and that of my unborn child, I would need more help. The kind of help that only someone with real power and influence could provide. That's when I decided to reach out to my father, Robert, the CEO of a major corporation. I hadn't spoken to him much since the news of my pregnancy and impending divorce, but I knew he would want to be involved, especially when it came to protecting his grandchild's future. When I called him and explained the situation, he was initially hesitant, urging me to take the high road and avoid any messy legal battles. But as I laid out the evidence against Mark and my plan for revenge, I could sense his resolve wavering. "Are you sure about this, Emily?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. "Once you set this in motion, there's no going back." I took a deep breath, steeling my nerves. "I'm sure, Dad. Mark betrayed me in the worst way possible, and he has to face the consequences. I won't let him get away with this, if not when my child's future is at stake." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then finally he spoke. "All right, sweetheart. If this is what you really want, you have my full support. Just say the word, and I'll make sure you have the best lawyers and resources at your disposal." Relief washed over me, knowing that I had my father's backing. With his influence and resources, Mark didn't stand a chance. He had made the mistake of underestimating me, and now he would pay the price for his arrogance. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with my father and the legal team he assembled, building an airtight case against Mark. Every lie, every betrayal, every instance of his deceit was carefully documented and catalogued, creating a mountain of evidence that would be impossible for him to refute. As the legal proceedings began, I could see the panic in Mark's eyes as he realized just how much trouble he was in. His lawyer tried to negotiate a settlement, but I was resolute. I wanted everything, and I wouldn't rest until I got it. Throughout the process, Mark tried to plead with me, to appeal to my sense of compassion and the love we once shared. But every time I looked at him, all I saw was the man who had shattered my trust and thrown away our marriage like it was nothing. And so I pressed on, my determination fueled by the burning desire for justice and the knowledge that I was doing this for the sake of my child, to ensure that they would never have to suffer the same kind of betrayal and heartbreak that I had endured. The day of the divorce proceedings, I strode into the lawyer's office with my head held high, my father and Laura by my side. Mark and his attorney were already there, and the tension in the room was palpable. As we took our seats, Mark leaned over and tried to catch my eye. "Emily, please, can we talk about this? I don't want it to come to this." I met his gaze, my expression cold and detached. "There's nothing to talk about, Mark. You made your choice, and now it's time to face the consequences." He opened his mouth to respond, but his lawyer placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. The proceedings began, and for the next several hours, we systematically laid out the evidence of Mark's infidelity and betrayal. With each piece of damning evidence presented, I could see the color draining from Mark's face. His lawyer tried to object and deflect, but the mountain of proof was undeniable. Recordings of Mark's secret liaisons, bank statements showing unexplained expenditures, and even private investigator reports detailing his sordid affairs, it was all there laid bare for the world to see. As the hours ticked by, Mark's composure began to crumble. He shifted in his seat, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. At one point he turned to me, tears in his eyes, and mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." But it was too little, too late. I simply stared back at him, my expression unwavering, resolute in my determination to see justice served. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge cleared his throat and delivered the verdict. Mark would be required to pay a substantial settlement, covering child support for our unborn child as well as alimony and other costs. He would also be forced to sell off several assets, including the house we had once shared, to cover the financial obligations. As the terms were read aloud, I could see the defeat in Mark's eyes. He had gambled everything on his affair with Heather, convinced that he could discard me and start anew without consequence. But he had underestimated my resolve, my strength, and my willingness to fight for what was rightfully mine. After the proceedings concluded, Mark tried to approach me one last time. "Emily, please, can we talk? I never wanted to hurt you like this." I turned to face him, my expression steely and unwavering. "You had your chance, Mark. You chose to throw away our marriage for a fling, and now you have to live with the consequences." He opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Don't bother. It's over, Mark. You've lost everything. Your job, your money, and most importantly, your family." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there alone, the weight of his decisions finally catching up to him. In the weeks that followed, I focused on preparing for the arrival of my child, determined to create a secure and loving environment for them. Mark's betrayal still stung, but the satisfaction of seeing him face the consequences of his actions helped to dull the pain. As I settled into my new apartment, a sense of peace washed over me. I had taken control of my life, reclaimed my power, and ensured that my child would never have to suffer the same heartbreak and betrayal that I had endured. And as for Mark, well, let's just say that his troubles were only just beginning. In the months following the divorce, my life took an unexpected turn. Thanks to my father's mentorship and influence, I found myself rising through the ranks of the corporate world at a breakneck pace. It was a sharp contrast to the struggles Mark was facing in the wake of our split. Word of his infidelity had spread like wildfire, and before long he found himself out of a job, his once promising career in shambles. I'll never forget the day I ran into him at the grocery store. He looked like a shell of his former self, disheveled, unshaven, and carrying a burden of defeat on his shoulders. When he saw me, his eyes widened, and he quickly tried to duck down an aisle, but I called out to him, "Mark, is that you?" He froze, his shoulders slumping in resignation as he turned to face me. "Emily," he mumbled, unable to meet my gaze. "I barely recognized you," I said, taking in his appearance. "Life's been tough, I take it?" He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You could say that. After everything that happened, I lost my job, my house, pretty much everything." A part of me felt a twinge of pity for him, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of vindication. This was the price he had to pay for his betrayal. "And what about Heather?" I asked, unable to resist twisting the knife just a little bit. "I assume she's sticking by your side through all of this?" Mark's expression darkened, and he averted his gaze. "Heather left me," he muttered. "Once she found out I was broke, she took off. Said she didn't sign up for this." I couldn't help but let out a laugh at the irony of it all. "Well, what did you expect, Mark? You threw away a perfectly good marriage for her, and now she's done the same to you." His jaw clenched, and I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. "You don't have to rub it in, Emily. I know I screwed up, okay? I've paid the price for my mistakes." Have you, though? I countered, taking a step closer to him. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're still living in denial. You haven't truly faced the consequences of your actions. He opened his mouth to respond, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. Let me make something clear, Mark. You lost everything because of your own greed and selfishness. You chose to betray me, to throw away our marriage for a fling, and now you're reaping what you've sown. His shoulders slumped, and I could see the defeat in his eyes. He knew I was right. I hope you learn from this, Mark, I continued. I hope you understand the pain and heartbreak you've caused, not just to me, but to everyone around you. Because if you don't, you're destined to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there alone, a broken man consumed by the weight of his own actions. As I made my way through the rest of the store, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. It wasn't just the fact that I had won the divorce settlement or that I was thriving in my career. No, what truly mattered was that I had taken control of my life, refused to be a victim, and ensured that Mark faced the consequences of his betrayal. And as I rubbed my growing belly, feeling the gentle flutter of my unborn child, I knew that I had made the right choice. My child would never have to endure the pain and heartbreak that I had experienced. They would grow up knowing that their mother was a strong, resilient woman who fought for justice and refused to let anyone take advantage of her. From that day on, I vowed to be the best mother I could be, pouring all of my love and energy into creating a secure, nurturing environment for my child. And as for Mark, well, he would have to find his own way, living with the consequences of his actions for the rest of his life. The months flew by, and before I knew it, I found myself sitting in the plush leather chair of the CEO's office, the very same chair my father had occupied for decades. As I looked around at the sleek modern decor and breathtaking views of the city's skyline, a sense of pride and accomplishment washed over me. I had come so far, rising through the ranks with a determination and drive that had left my colleagues in awe. And now, here I was, taking over the reins of the company from my father, ready to lead it into a new era of success. As I settled into my new role, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me to this point. The pain and heartbreak of Mark's betrayal, the grueling legal battle, and the long road to rebuilding my life. It had all been worth it to get to where I was today. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts, and I looked up to see my assistant poking her head in. "Miss Anderson, you have a visitor." I frowned, glancing at my schedule. "I don't have any appointments scheduled for this afternoon." The assistant shifted uncomfortably. "It's your ex-husband, Mark. He's insisting on seeing you." A flicker of annoyance flickered within me, but I quickly tamped it down. Of course Mark would show up unannounced, thinking he could just waltz back into my life whenever it suited him. "Send him in," I said, straightening in my chair and adopting a cool, professional demeanor. A few moments later the door opened and Mark stepped into the office. He looked even more disheveled than the last time I'd seen him, his clothes rumpled and his eyes sunken. It was clear that life had not been kind to him since our divorce. "Emily," he said, his voice strained, "thank you for seeing me." I arched an eyebrow, refusing to let him see how his presence affected me. "What do you want, Mark?" He took a deep breath, his gaze darting around the opulent office. I wanted to apologize for everything." I let out a derisive snort. "A little late for that, don't you think?" His shoulders slumped and he took a step closer to my desk. "I know I can never make up for what I did to you, to us, but I want you to know that I regret it every single day." "Do you?" I challenged, leaning back in my chair. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're only sorry because you got caught and lost everything." Mark flinched as if I had struck him, but he didn't deny it. "You're right," he admitted softly. "I was selfish and arrogant. I thought I could have it all. The perfect wife, the mistress on the side, the picture-perfect life. But in the end, it all blew up in my face, and I lost everything that truly mattered." I studied him carefully, searching for any hint of deception or manipulation, but all I saw was a broken man, a shadow of his former self, consumed by the weight of his own mistakes. "I don't expect your forgiveness," he continued. "I just wanted you to know that I understand the gravity of what I've done, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, even if it's never enough." A heavy silence hung in the air, and for a moment I considered offering him a sliver of forgiveness, a chance to absolve himself of the guilt that so clearly weighed him down. But then I remembered the pain he had caused, the trust he had shattered, and the future he had nearly robbed from me and my child. "You're right, Mark," I said, my voice low and steady. "You can't make amends for what you've done, not to me and certainly not to our child." His eyes widened and he opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "This child will grow up knowing the truth about their father, that he was a selfish, deceitful man who valued his own desires above everything else. They will know that you betrayed us in the worst possible way, and that you were too weak and cowardly to face the consequences." Mark's face crumpled, and I could see the impact of my words hitting him like a physical blow. But I didn't stop there. "You had your chance at happiness, Mark. You had a loving wife and the opportunity to be a father, but you threw it all away for a fleeting moment of pleasure. And now you'll have to live with that regret for the rest of your life." He opened his mouth, perhaps to plead or beg for forgiveness, but I held up my hand once more. "I think it's time for you to leave," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "And don't bother coming back. You lost the right to be a part of our lives a long time ago." With that, I turned away from him, dismissing him from my presence and my life once and for all. As he shuffled out of the office, his shoulders hunched in defeat, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had faced the demons of my past, confronted the man who had nearly destroyed me, and emerged victorious. I had claimed my future with strength and resilience, leaving Mark to face the consequences of his betrayals alone, a cautionary tale of greed and deception. And as I gazed out over the city skyline, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, secure in the knowledge that I was a survivor, a fighter, and a force to be reckoned with. I stared at my phone, dumbfounded by Kevin's invitation. It had been years since we last spoke, our lives diverging after college. While his carefree spirit beckoned adventure, my world revolved around spreadsheets and the monotonous rhythm of corporate life. "I don't know, Kev," I said hesitantly. "A camping trip seems—" "Exactly what you need," he interrupted. "When was the last time you stepped out of that office, Harper?" His words struck a chord. Between caring for my ailing father and the endless grind at work, I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something for myself. "You've got a point," I conceded, "but I can't just drop everything." "Yes, you can," he insisted. "One weekend, Harper. That's all I'm asking. We'll hike, tell stories by the fire, and you can rediscover that spark you've been missing." My practical side battled with the yearning for adventure. With a deep breath, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life forever. "All right, I'm in." The following Saturday, I found myself at a coffee shop surrounded by an eclectic group of Kevin's friends. As I sipped my latte, trying to appear nonchalant, Kevin approached with a tall, rugged-looking man in tow. "Harper, this is Miles," Kevin announced, "our resident outdoorsman and guide for the weekend." Miles extended a calloused hand, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Pleasure to meet you. Kevin tells me you're an accountant?" I nodded, suddenly self-conscious about my corporate attire amidst their casual hiking gear. "Well, we'll have to toughen you up," Miles said with a wink. "The great outdoors doesn't care about numbers." His teasing put me at ease, and I found myself laughing alongside the others. As we set off for the trailhead, I couldn't shake the feeling that this trip would be more than just a weekend escape. The hike proved more challenging than I anticipated, but Miles stayed by my side, offering encouragement and tips. With each step, the weight of my responsibilities seemed to lighten. "First time hiking, Harper?" he asked, noticing my labored breaths. "Is it that obvious?" I replied, trying to mask my struggle. Miles chuckled. "Don't worry, we all started somewhere. Just take it at your own pace." As the day progressed, I found myself opening up to Miles about my life, the endless hours at the office, caring for my father, and the constant feeling of being trapped. He listened intently, understanding the burdens I carried. That night, huddled around the campfire, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in years. Miles's stories of his adventures captivated me, painting vivid pictures of landscapes I'd only dreamed of seeing. "Why don't you ever travel, Harper?" he asked, his gaze piercing through the flickering flames. I shrugged, unsure of how to articulate the weight of my responsibilities. Too much to leave behind, I guess. Miles nodded, understanding without judgment. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of a different life, one filled with freedom and possibility. The next morning, I awoke in the tent, my body aching but my spirit renewed. As I emerged, Miles was already brewing coffee over the campfire. "Morning, Harper," he greeted with a warm smile. "Ready for another adventure?" I took a deep breath, savoring the crisp mountain air. As ready as I'll ever be, and for the first time in years, I truly meant it. The morning after our camping trip, I found myself back at the coffee shop, surrounded by Kevin's friends. The air buzzed with excitement as everyone recounted their favorite moments from the weekend. "Did you see the look on Harper's face when she reached the summit?" Kevin teased, nudging me playfully. "I thought she was going to keel over." I rolled my eyes, but couldn't help grinning. "Hey, cut me some slack. It was my first real hike." "You did great, Harper," Miles chimed in, his voice sending a flutter through my chest. "Not everyone takes to the outdoors like a natural." Our eyes met, and for a moment it felt like we were the only two people in the room. Kevin cleared his throat, snapping us back to reality. "So who's up for another adventure next month?" he asked, rubbing his hands together mischievously. The group erupted in a chorus of cheers and laughter, but I stayed silent, suddenly aware of the weight of my responsibilities waiting for me at home. Miles must have noticed my hesitation. "You know, Harper, you don't have to decide right away," he said gently. "Just think about it." I nodded, grateful for his understanding. As the group dispersed, Miles lingered behind. "I meant what I said out there," he murmured. "You were incredible this weekend. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Before I could respond, he pulled me into a warm embrace, his rugged scent enveloping me. My heart raced as we parted, his touch igniting a spark I thought had long extinguished. "See you around, Harper," he said with a wink, disappearing into the bustling city streets. Over the next few months, our camping trips became a regular escape from the monotony of daily life. With each adventure, Miles and I grew closer, our bond strengthened by the shared challenges and triumphs of the great outdoors. One evening, as we sat around the crackling campfire, Miles turned to me with a contemplative expression. "Have you ever thought about doing something different with your life?" he asked, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. I shrugged, unsure of how to respond. "Like what?" "I don't know," he mused. "Traveling, maybe? Seeing the world beyond those spreadsheets and cubicles?" His words struck a chord within me, awakening a yearning I'd long suppressed. Before I could overthink it, the words tumbled out. "I'd love that, Miles, but with my dad's health and my job." I trailed off, the weight of my responsibilities crashing down once again. Miles reached out, taking my hand in his calloused grip. "Harper, you can't live your life for other people. You deserve to be happy too." His words resonated deeply, and in that moment, I knew something had to change. I couldn't continue sacrificing my dreams for the sake of others' expectations. "You're right," I said, my voice trembling with a newfound determination. "I can't keep living like this." Miles smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "That's my girl." From that night on, a shift occurred within me. I started making plans, exploring options, and dreaming of a life beyond the confines of my routine. And through it all, Miles remained by my side, unwavering in his support and belief in me. Little did I know the path I was embarking on would lead me down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of my resilience and resolve. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs as our group embarked on another hiking adventure. Miles led the way, his confident strides guiding us deeper into the wilderness. "All right, everyone, we'll take the scenic route today," he announced, adjusting his backpack. "It's a bit more challenging, but the views are worth it." I exchanged a nervous glance with Kevin, who just shrugged and grinned. "You heard the man. Let's do this." As we trekked along the winding trail, I couldn't help but steal glances at Miles. The way he navigated the terrain with such ease and grace was captivating. "Need a hand?" he asked, slowing his pace to fall in step beside me. I shook my head, determined to prove myself. "I've got this." Miles chuckled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Stubborn as always. I like that about you, Harper." His words sent a flutter through my chest, and I had to force myself to keep my focus on the trail ahead. After a grueling ascent, we finally reached a breathtaking overlook. Miles gestured for me to join him at the edge, and I gasped at the panoramic view that stretched out before us. "Incredible, isn't it?" he murmured, his voice low and intimate. I nodded, words failing me in the face of such natural beauty. In that moment, it felt like Miles and I were the only two people in the world. As the others settled down for a well-deserved break, Miles turned to me with a mischievous grin. "Up for a little detour?" he asked, his eyes sparkling with adventure. Before I could respond, he grabbed my hand and led me down a narrow path, veering off the main trail. My heart raced with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, but I trusted Miles implicitly. After a short hike, we emerged into a secluded clearing, a pristine waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool. "Miles, this is—" I trailed off, unable to find the words to describe the breathtaking scene before us. He simply smiled, that familiar twinkle in his eye. "I thought you might like it." Without hesitation, Miles began stripping off his hiking gear, and I averted my gaze, suddenly flustered. "What are you doing?" I asked, my cheeks flushing. "Going for a swim," he replied nonchalantly. "Care to join me?" Before I could protest, he dove gracefully into the pool, resurfacing with a playful splash. I couldn't help but laugh at his carefree spirit. "Come on, Harper," he called out. "Live a little." Biting my lip, I weighed my options. Part of me wanted to cling to the safety of my comfort zone, but a larger part yearned for the freedom and spontaneity that Miles embodied. With a deep breath, I stripped down to my undergarments and slipped into the cool, refreshing water. Miles beamed, pulling me into an embrace that sent shivers down my spine. "That's my girl," he murmured, his lips dangerously close to mine. In that moment, surrounded by nature's untamed beauty, I felt more alive than I had in years. Miles had awoken a part of me I thought had long been extinguished, a thirst for adventure, for living life to the fullest. As we floated together in the tranquil pool, our bodies intertwined, I knew that my life would never be the same again. Miles had shown me a world beyond the confines of my routine, and I was determined to embrace it, no matter the cost. Little did I know, the path I had chosen would lead me down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of my resilience and resolve. As the sun dipped below the horizon, our group gathered around the crackling campfire, the dancing flames casting flickering shadows across our faces. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and camaraderie. "All right, who's got a good story to share?" Kevin asked, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. A chorus of laughter and protests erupted, but Miles remained silent, his gaze fixed on the flames. I studied his profile, mesmerized by the way the firelight played across his rugged features. "What about you, Harper?" he said suddenly, turning to me with a warm smile. "I'm sure you've got some tales from the corporate world." I shrugged self-consciously. "I don't know, Miles. My life isn't exactly the stuff of adventure novels." He leaned closer, his eyes holding a hint of mischief. "Come on, there has to be something interesting in all those spreadsheets." Faced with his playful prodding, I found myself recounting a particularly harrowing tax season, complete with all-nighters and office drama. To my surprise, the group was enraptured, hanging on my every word. As the laughter died down, Miles caught my eye, a silent understanding passing between us. In that moment, I realized how much I'd been missing out on, the simple pleasures of good company and shared experiences. "Your turn, Miles," I challenged, emboldened by the warmth of the fire and the camaraderie surrounding us. He grinned, that familiar twinkle in his eye. "All right, but brace yourselves. This one's a doozy." Miles launched into a captivating tale of his solo trek through the Himalayas, his words painting vivid pictures of treacherous mountain passes and breathtaking vistas. As he spoke, I found myself leaning in, hanging on his every word, desperate to soak up every detail of his adventures. When he finished, the group erupted in a chorus of appreciative cheers and applause. But Miles's gaze was fixed on me, his eyes shining with a depth of emotion that sent my heart racing. "Why don't you ever travel, Harper?" he asked, his voice low and intimate. I hesitated, suddenly aware of the weight of my responsibilities. "Responsibilities, I guess. Too much to leave behind." Miles nodded, his expression understanding. "I get it, but you can't let life pass you by." His words struck a chord within me, awakening a yearning I'd long suppressed. Before I could respond, Kevin chimed in, oblivious to the moment he'd interrupted. "All right, enough with the heavy stuff," he said, clapping his hands together. "Who's up for some ghost stories?" The group erupted in a chorus of laughter and excited chatter, but Miles and I remained locked in our own private moment, a silent understanding passing between us. As the night wore on, I found myself gravitating closer to Miles, drawn in by his warmth and charisma. We shared stories and laughs, our connection deepening with every passing moment. When the fire finally dwindled to embers, Miles stood, offering me his hand. "Take a walk with me?" Without hesitation, I accepted, allowing him to lead me away from the camp and into the embrace of the starry night. We strolled in comfortable silence, our shoulders brushing with every step. Finally, Miles stopped, turning to face me. "Harper, His voice trailed off, but his eyes spoke volumes, conveying a depth of emotion that left me breathless. Before I could respond, he pulled me into a searing kiss, his lips claiming mine with a fierce intensity. In that moment, all my doubts and fears melted away, replaced by a burning desire that consumed me from the inside out. When we finally broke apart, gasping for air, Miles rested his forehead against mine. "You're incredible, Harper," he murmured, his words sending shivers down my spine. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." As we made our way back to camp, our fingers intertwined, I knew that my life had been forever changed. Miles had awakened a fire within me, a thirst for adventure and passion that I could no longer ignore. Little did I know, the path I had chosen would lead me down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of my resilience and resolve. I awoke to the gentle rustle of the tent fabric, the crisp morning air seeping in. As I blinked away the remnants of sleep, the memories of the previous night came flooding back. Miles's kiss, the intensity of his embrace, the way he had ignited a fire within me. Carefully I unzipped the tent flap, squinting against the bright morning sun. Miles was already up, tending to the campfire, his movements fluid and confident. He glanced up as I emerged, a warm smile spreading across his rugged features. "Morning, sleepyhead," he greeted, his voice rich and inviting. "Coffee's almost ready." I nodded, still feeling a bit dazed from the events of the night before. As I approached the fire, Miles handed me a steaming mug, his fingers brushing against mine in a simple yet electrifying touch. "Thanks," I murmured, taking a tentative sip and savoring the rich, earthy flavor. Miles studied me for a moment, his eyes sparkling with amusement. "You look like you could use some more rest. Rough night?" A flush crept up my cheeks as I recalled the passionate embrace we had shared under the stars. "You could say that." He chuckled, that familiar twinkle in his eye sending butterflies fluttering through my stomach. "Well, I hope you're ready for another adventure today. I've got something special planned." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, and what might that be?" Miles simply grinned, that mischievous glint in his eye. "It's a surprise, but trust me, you're going to love it." As we set off on the day's hike, I couldn't help but steal glances at Miles, my mind replaying the events of the previous night. The way he had held me, kissed me, it was as if he had awoken a part of me that had been dormant for far too long. Miles seemed to sense my distraction, reaching out to give my hand a gentle squeeze. "You okay over there?" I nodded, offering him a reassuring smile. "Yeah, just taking it all in." He grinned, that infectious enthusiasm lighting up his face. "Well, get ready, because we're almost there." As we rounded a bend in the trail, a breathtaking sight came into view. A secluded waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool, surrounded by lush foliage and towering peaks. "Miles, this is—" I trailed off, at a loss for words. He simply smiled, that familiar twinkle in his eye. "I knew you'd like it." Without hesitation, he began stripping off his hiking gear, and I couldn't help but admire the toned lines of his body. When he caught me staring, he winked playfully. "Care to join me for a dip?" I bit my lip, suddenly self-conscious. But the allure of the cool, inviting water, and the prospect of being close to Miles again, was too strong to resist. Slowly, I peeled off my own layers, trying to ignore the way Miles's gaze raked over my exposed skin. When we were both down to our undergarments, he extended his hand, his eyes burning with an intensity that set my heart racing. "Trust me," he murmured, his voice low and seductive. I placed my hand in his, allowing him to lead me into the refreshing embrace of the pool. As the water enveloped us, Miles pulled me close, his muscular arms wrapping around me in a possessive embrace. "You're incredible, Harper," he whispered, his lips brushing against my ear. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." In that moment, surrounded by nature's untamed beauty and cradled in Miles's strong embrace, I felt more alive than I ever had before. He had awakened a fire within me, a thirst for adventure and passion that I could no longer ignore. As our bodies intertwined beneath the cascading waterfall, I surrendered myself to the moment, allowing the rush of desire to consume me. Miles claimed my lips in a searing kiss, his touch igniting a blaze of emotions that threatened to consume us both. Little did I know that the path I had chosen would lead me down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of my resilience and resolve. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Only the intensity of our connection, the promise of a future filled with passion and adventure. The waterfall's gentle roar filled my ears as I clung to Miles, our bodies intertwined beneath the cascading waters. His strong arms encircled me, our kiss deepening with a fierce intensity that left me breathless. When we finally broke apart, gasping for air, Miles rested his forehead against mine, his eyes shining with a depth of emotion that sent shivers down my spine. "Harper," he murmured, his voice thick with desire. "I've never felt this way about anyone before." I traced the sharp line of his jaw, marveling at the way the water droplets clung to his tanned skin. "Neither have I." He captured my hand in his, pressing a tender kiss to my palm. "Stay with me, Harper. Let's make this adventure last forever." My heart raced at the implications of his words, the promise of a future filled with passion and freedom. Before I could respond, he silenced me with another searing kiss, his touch igniting a fire within me that threatened to consume us both. From that moment on, our bond only deepened, forged in the crucible of our shared experiences and the intensity of our connection. Miles showed me a world beyond the confines of my routine, a life filled with adventure and possibility. A year later, as we stood hand in hand beneath the same waterfall where our love had blossomed, Miles dropped to one knee, his eyes shining with determination. "Harper," he began, his voice steady despite the tremor of emotion, "you've shown me what it means to truly live, to embrace every moment and cherish the beauty in this world. You've awakened a fire within me that I never knew existed." He reached into his pocket, producing a simple yet elegant ring. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of embarking on the greatest adventure of all, a life together?" Tears of joy streamed down my cheeks as I nodded, rendered speechless by the depth of his love and devotion. Miles slipped the ring onto my finger, sealing our promise with a kiss that set my soul ablaze. Our wedding was a simple yet beautiful affair, a celebration of our love and the unbreakable bond we had forged. As we exchanged vows beneath the open sky, surrounded by the majestic peaks that had witnessed the blossoming of our romance, I knew that I had found my forever. The years that followed were filled with adventure and passion, our love only growing stronger with each challenge we faced together. We traveled the world, explored hidden corners of the globe, and cherished every moment of our shared journey. But eventually the responsibilities of life caught up with us. When my father's health began to decline, Miles didn't hesitate to support my decision to move him into our home and become his caretaker. "Your family is my family, Harper," he assured me, his eyes shining with unwavering devotion. "We'll get through this together." Little did I know that those words would be put to the ultimate test, as the path we had chosen led us down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of our resilience and resolve. 4 years after our fairy tale wedding, the harsh realities of life began to catch up with us. My father's health had taken a turn for the worse, and the decision to move him into our home weighed heavily on both of us. "Are you sure about this, Harper?" Miles asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "It's a huge responsibility." I nodded, my resolve unwavering. "He's my dad, Miles. I have to do this." Miles pulled me into a warm embrace, his strong arms offering reassurance. "You know, I'll be here every step of the way, right? We're in this together." His words brought me comfort, but deep down, I knew the strain this would put on our relationship. Caring for my ailing father would consume much of my time and energy, leaving little room for the adventurous lifestyle we had once enjoyed. True to his word, Miles stepped up to the challenge, helping with my father's care and offering unwavering support. But as the months wore on, the financial burden began to take its toll. "I've been crunching the numbers," I said one evening, my voice laced with worry. "Between Dad's medical expenses and the loss of my income, we're stretching thin." Miles reached across the table, taking my hand in his calloused grip. "We'll figure it out, Harper. Money isn't everything." But the strain was evident in his eyes, a flicker of doubt that he tried to conceal. I knew he was putting on a brave face for my sake, but the cracks were beginning to show. As my father's condition deteriorated, I made the difficult decision to quit my job, devoting myself entirely to his care. Miles supported my choice, but the financial strain only intensified. "I've been picking up extra work," he admitted one night, his voice tinged with exhaustion, "doing some freelance gigs to make ends meet." I studied his weary expression, guilt gnawing at my conscience. "Miles, you shouldn't have to shoulder this burden alone." He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's temporary, Harper. We'll get through this, I promise." But as the weeks turned into months, Miles grew increasingly distant, his once vibrant spirit dimming under the weight of our circumstances. I tried to broach the subject, but he would brush me off, insisting everything was fine. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a stack of unpaid bills and notices from creditors that the truth began to unravel. Miles had been hiding a secret from me, a gambling addiction that had spiraled out of control, leaving us drowning in debt. When I finally confronted him, the floodgates opened, and the depth of his deceit came crashing down upon us. "I'm sorry, Harper," he choked out, his eyes brimming with tears. "I never meant for it to go this far." Anger and betrayal coursed through my veins as I realized the extent of his lies. The man I had trusted, the partner I had vowed to spend my life with, had been living a double life, jeopardizing everything we had built together. "How could you, Miles?" I cried, my voice trembling with anguish. "After everything we've been through, how could you do this to us?" His shoulders slumped, defeat etched into every line of his face. "I never asked for this life, Harper. I needed an escape." In that moment, the weight of his betrayal was suffocating, threatening to crush the very foundation of our love. As I looked into his eyes, I saw a stranger, a man consumed by his own demons, willing to sacrifice everything for the thrill of the gamble. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, a path that would test the very limits of my resilience and resolve, forcing me to confront the harsh reality of the man I had once called my soulmate. The weight of Miles's betrayal hung heavy in the air, suffocating me with each breath. As I stared into his tear-filled eyes, I saw a stranger, a man consumed by his own demons, willing to sacrifice everything we had built together for the thrill of the gamble. "How long?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "How long have you been lying to me?" Miles couldn't meet my gaze, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Too long," he whispered, shame etching lines into his once vibrant face. In that moment, the full extent of his deceit hit me like a physical blow. The man I had trusted, the partner I had vowed to spend my life with, had been living a double life, jeopardizing everything for his addiction. As the shock began to wear off, anger took its place, a white-hot fury that coursed through my veins. "Get out," I spat, my hands balling into fists at my sides. Miles's head snapped up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Harper, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I shouted, the dam of emotions finally bursting. "How you've been gambling away our future. How you've been lying to me, day after day, while I poured my heart and soul into this family?" He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off, the words tumbling out in a torrent of hurt and betrayal. "No, Miles, I don't want to hear it. Not anymore." I took a deep, shuddering breath, steeling my resolve. "I want you out of this house. Tonight." A flicker of defiance flashed in his eyes, but it was quickly extinguished by the weight of his shame. Without a word, he turned and walked out, the sound of the door slamming behind him echoing through the empty silence. In the days that followed, I methodically untangled the web of lies Miles had spun, uncovering the full extent of his gambling debt and the secret life he had been leading. With each new revelation, The man I had loved slipped further away, replaced by a stranger whose actions had shattered my world. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a hidden stash of letters and photographs that the final, devastating truth came to light. Miles had been living a double life, with a secret family and children I had never known existed. As I stared at the smiling faces of the woman and 2 children in the photographs, a wave of nausea washed over me. How could he have done this? How could he have so callously betrayed not only me, but an entire other family? In that moment, something inside me shifted. The anger and hurt gave way to a burning determination for justice, for retribution against the man who had so thoroughly deceived us all. With a steely resolve, I began to piece together a plan, meticulously gathering evidence and reaching out to Miles's other victims, his first wife and children, who had been left in the dark about his double life. When I finally confronted him, Miles broke down, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of his lies. "Please, Harper," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I was weak, and I lost control." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The man I had once loved was gone, replaced by a shell of a human being consumed by his own selfish desires. In the end, my revenge was swift and merciless. I exposed Miles's gambling addiction and secret family to our friends and loved ones, watching as his reputation crumbled to dust. His first wife filed for divorce, and he found himself cut off from the very support system he had taken for granted. As for me, I channeled my pain into a newfound purpose, helping other families torn apart by addiction and deception. Through my work, I found redemption and a sense of closure, finally able to leave the twisted trail of heartbreak and betrayal behind me. Miles's fate was sealed, a cautionary tale of what happens when one allows their demons to consume them. And though the scars of his betrayal would never fully heal, I took solace in the knowledge that I had emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. I stood frozen, the world crumbling around me as I watched Derek's lips locked with Amanda's in a passionate embrace. My heart shattered into a million pieces, the betrayal cutting deeper than any knife ever could. "Derek, how could you? After all we've been through?" I choked out, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and utter devastation. Amanda pulled away from Derek, her red lips curled into a smug grin. "Oh, he's mine now, Lily. You're just outdated." Her words stung like venom, each syllable twisting the knife deeper into my soul. I had dedicated my life to this man, sacrificing my dreams and ambitions to support his career and raise our family. And this was how he repaid me, by throwing it all away for a young, vapid thing like Amanda. I should have seen the signs earlier. The late nights at the office, the unexplained expenses, the distant looks he'd give me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. But I had been too blinded by love and loyalty to notice the cracks forming in our once perfect marriage. "Get out," Derek spat, his eyes cold and unrecognizable. "You're making a scene." I wanted to scream, to cry, to hurl every insult and accusation I could muster at them both. But I found myself paralyzed, my throat constricted by the weight of my shattered hopes and dreams. With what little dignity I had left, I turned and walked away, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I made my way out of the office, I couldn't help but wonder where it had all gone wrong. Just that morning, I had awoken before dawn, as I did every day to prepare Derek's favorite breakfast and ensure his suit was pressed to perfection. It was a routine I had followed for decades, a labor of love that had once brought me joy. But now, as I looked back on the sacrifices I had made, the countless times I had put his needs before my own, I felt a bitter taste of regret lingering on my tongue. How could he do this to me? To us? As I stepped out into the cool morning air, the weight of his betrayal finally hit me full force. Tears streamed down my face, hot and unrelenting, as I made my way to the car. I had always prided myself on being a strong, resilient woman, but in that moment I felt utterly broken. The man I had loved and trusted with every fiber of my being had shattered my heart into a million pieces, and I didn't know if I would ever be able to put it back together again. The office became a battleground, with Amanda asserting her dominance like a lioness staking claim over her territory. Every interaction felt like a thinly veiled attack, her words laced with venom and hidden jabs. "Lily, darling, have you considered retiring?" she would say. her saccharine tone dripping with condescension. "You've worked so hard for so long. Don't you think it's time to let the younger generation take over?" I would force a tight-lipped smile, swallowing the bitter retorts that threatened to spill from my lips. But with each passing day, it became increasingly difficult to maintain my composure. Derek, once my unwavering ally, seemed to be under Amanda's spell. He would nod along with her suggestions, his eyes glazed over as if in a trance. It was as if the man I had loved and built a life with had been replaced by a stranger. "Did you see the new marketing campaign Amanda put together?" He would gush, completely oblivious to the way his words cut me like a knife. "She's a real visionary." I wanted to scream, to shake him, and remind him of the countless nights we had stayed up late, dreaming of building this business together. But the words stuck in my throat, replaced by a bitter taste of betrayal. Nights became a blur of loneliness and heartache. While Derek was out working late with Amanda, I would sit alone in our once happy home, surrounded by the ghosts of memories past. Flashes of our struggling years would haunt me. The countless sacrifices we had made, the dreams we had deferred, all in the hopes of building a better life for ourselves and our family. And now it felt like all of that had been for nothing. "You're being paranoid, Lily," Emma would say, her voice laced with concern. "Derek loves you. He would never do anything to hurt you." But the evidence was mounting, and no amount of reassurance could ease the gnawing doubt that had taken root in my heart. Unexplained expenses, late nights at the office, the way Derek's eyes would linger a little too long on Amanda's form, it all painted a picture that I could no longer ignore. And then the final blow came. It was a lavish office party, one that Derek and Amanda had planned without so much as a word to me. As I stood in the corner, nursing a lukewarm glass of wine, I watched as they moved through the crowd like a perfectly choreographed dance. Amanda's laugh rang out like a bell, her head thrown back in exaggerated mirth, and Derek, my Derek, looked at her with a hunger that I had never seen before. It was in that moment that the last shreds of my denial crumbled away, leaving me raw and exposed to the harsh reality of their betrayal. As the night wore on, I found myself retreating further and further into the shadows, until I could no longer bear the sight of their happiness at my expense. With tears streaming down my face, I slipped out of the party and into the cool night air, my heart shattered into a million pieces. Derek and Amanda's relationship became more brazen, as if they were flaunting their indiscretion for all to see. The once subtle glances and lingering touches gave way to outright public displays of affection that left me reeling. "You two make me sick," I spat one day, unable to hold back the bile rising in my throat. Amanda merely laughed, her perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on Derek's arm. "Oh, Lily, don't be bitter just because you're past your prime." Derek said nothing, his eyes downcast like a scolded child. It was as if he had become Amanda's puppet, dancing to her tune without a shred of remorse. The office became a battleground, with Amanda taking every opportunity to assert her dominance over me. She would casually undermine my decisions, questioning my judgment in front of clients and colleagues alike. "Lily, darling, are you sure that's the best approach?" she would say, her voice dripping with false concern. "Maybe we should let the younger, more innovative minds take the lead on this one." And Derek, the coward, would nod along, his silence cutting deeper than any words ever could. It was during one particularly heated exchange that the final blow came. Amanda had once again overstepped her boundaries, belittling me in front of the entire staff. "Face it, Lily, you're a relic of the past," she sneered. "It's time for you to step aside and let the new generation take over, starting with Derek." That was the final straw. Years of pent-up frustration and anger bubbled to the surface, and before I knew it, I was unleashing a torrent of words that I could never take back. "You think you're so special, Amanda?" I snarled, my voice trembling with rage. "You're nothing but a cheap, home-wrecking tramp who's using her looks to get ahead." The room fell silent, everyone's eyes trained on us like spectators at a gladiator match. Derek's face had drained of color, his mouth hanging open in shock. Amanda, for once, was speechless. Her perfectly sculpted mask of confidence had slipped, revealing the insecure, desperate woman beneath. In that moment, I felt a surge of power coursing through my veins. For too long I had allowed myself to be diminished, to be made to feel insignificant in my own life. But no more. With a newfound sense of determination, I turned on my heel and stormed out of the office, leaving a trail of stunned silence in my wake. As I drove home, the adrenaline coursing through my veins gave way to a profound sense of clarity. I had spent too long living in Derek's shadow, sacrificing my own dreams and aspirations for the sake of his success. No longer. From that moment on, I vowed to take back control of my life, to reclaim the power that had been stripped away from me piece by piece. Amanda and Derek may have thought they had won, but they had only awoken a force within me that they could never hope to contain. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready for war. The extravagant office party was the final nail in the coffin of my shattered marriage. As I stepped into the lavishly decorated ballroom, the weight of Derek and Amanda's betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. They were the center of attention, basking in the adoration of their colleagues and clients, like royalty holding court. Amanda's sequined dress clung to her body like a second skin, her perfectly coiffed hair and makeup a stark contrast to the haggard, defeated woman staring back at me in the mirror that morning. "Lily, darling, you made it," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We were starting to worry you wouldn't grace us with your presence." Derek remained silent, his eyes averting mine as if he couldn't bear to look at me. The coward. "Of course I wouldn't miss this celebration," I replied, forcing a tight smile that felt more like a grimace. As the night wore on, I found myself retreating to the fringes, nursing a lukewarm glass of wine as I watched Derek and Amanda work the room like seasoned performers. They were a well-oiled machine, finishing each other's sentences and basking in the adulation of their adoring fans. It was sickening. At one point, I caught Amanda's eye from across the room. Her perfectly painted lips curled into a smug grin, as if to say, "I won. He's mine now." I wanted to scream, to hurl my glass at her and wipe that smug expression off her face. But I knew that would only give her the satisfaction she craved. So I did the only thing I could. I left. I slipped out of the party unnoticed, my heart heavy with the weight of my shattered dreams. As I made my way to my car, the tears I had been holding back finally spilled forth, hot and unrelenting. It was over. Derek had made his choice, and it wasn't me. The drive to Emma's was a blur, the streetlights blending together in a haze of grief and betrayal. By the time I arrived, I was a shell of a woman, hollowed out and broken. Emma took one look at me and immediately ushered me inside, her arms enveloping me in a warm embrace as I sobbed uncontrollably. "It's over, Em," I choked out between gasps. "Derek, he chose her." Emma's face hardened, her eyes burning with a protective fury I had never seen before. "That bastard," she growled, her grip on me tightening. "I'll kill him." I shook my head, too drained to even entertain the thought of vengeance. "It's not worth it," I whispered, my voice hoarse from crying. I need to get away from all of this." And so, with Emma's unwavering support, I packed what little belongings I had and moved into her spare room. It was a temporary solution, but it was the only thing keeping me afloat in the midst of my personal tsunami. In the days that followed, I became a ghost, a mere shadow of the woman I once was. I stopped returning Derek's calls, stopped going into the office, stopped caring about anything beyond the basic necessities of survival. It was as if I had retreated into a cocoon, shutting out the world and all its cruelties as I licked my wounds and tried to piece myself back together. But as the weeks turned into months, a fire began to ignite within me, a burning desire for retribution, for justice, for the sweet taste of revenge. Amanda and Derek may have thought they had won, but they had only awoken a sleeping giant, and I was determined to make them pay for every ounce of pain and humiliation they had inflicted upon me. The battle had only just begun. The fire that had been ignited within me burned brighter with each passing day, fueled by the sting of Derek and Amanda's betrayal. I knew that I couldn't let them get away with what they had done, not just to me, but to the life we had built together. It was Emma who first suggested seeking revenge. "They can't just treat you like that and get away with it," she fumed one night over glasses of wine that had become our nightly ritual. At first, I dismissed the idea, too consumed by my own pain and heartbreak to even entertain the thought of retaliation. But as the weeks dragged on and the humiliation of my public ousting sank in, a newfound determination took root. It was then that I reached out to Owen, an old high school friend who had always had a knack for storytelling and technology. If anyone could help me expose Amanda and Derek for the snakes they truly were, it was him. "So let me get this straight," Owen said, his brow furrowed as he nursed a beer across from me at our favorite dive bar. "You want to take down your lying, cheating husband and his mistress?" I nodded, my jaw set with grim resolve. "They think they've won, but they have no idea what's coming." A slow grin spread across Owen's face, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "All right, Lily, I'm in. Let's make these assholes pay." From that moment on, Owen became my co-conspirator, my partner in crime. We spent countless hours huddled over his laptop, scouring the internet for any shred of dirt we could find on Amanda's past. And boy, did we hit the jackpot. It turned out that Amanda was a serial homewrecker, leaving a trail of broken homes and shattered lives in her wake. She had a pattern, seducing wealthy, successful men, leeching off of them until they had nothing left, and then moving on to her next victim. "This is gold, Lily," Owen crowed, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he compiled our findings. "We're going to bury that bitch with her own past." With each new revelation, my thirst for vengeance grew stronger. I wanted the world to see Amanda for the manipulative, conniving snake that she truly was. And Derek? He was going to get a front-row seat to the destruction of his precious mistress. We started small, leaking snippets of information to local gossip blogs and forums, watching with glee as the whispers and rumors began to swirl. It was like throwing a match onto a pile of kindling, the flames of scandal licking at Amanda's carefully cultivated image. But it wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wanted to see them burn. So we took it a step further, creating an anonymous website dedicated to exposing Amanda's sordid past. We posted screenshots of her past conquests' social media accounts, detailing the heartbreak and financial ruin she had left in her wake. And then we waited. At first, the reactions were muted, a few raised eyebrows, a few hushed whispers, but then, like a wildfire, the scandal took on a life of its own. Suddenly, Amanda's name was on everyone's lips, her once pristine reputation tarnished beyond repair. I could see the cracks beginning to form in her perfect facade, the strain of the mounting pressure wearing her down. And Derek? Well, he was finally starting to see the true nature of the woman he had risked everything for. As the fallout intensified, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. This was just the beginning, a mere taste of the retribution that was to come. Amanda and Derek had made the mistake of underestimating me, of thinking that I would simply roll over and accept their betrayal. But they were about to learn a valuable lesson. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And I was just getting started. The fallout from our anonymous leaks was swift and merciless. Amanda's carefully curated image began to unravel at the seams, the skeletons in her closet finally coming to light. At first, she tried to brush it off, putting on a brave face and denying the allegations. But as more and more damning evidence surfaced, her defiant facade crumbled like a house of cards. It was during this time that I started receiving frantic calls from Derek, his once confident tone replaced by a desperate pleading. "Lily, you have to help me," he begged, his voice strained. "This whole thing is spiraling out of control. Amanda's past. I had no idea." I couldn't help but revel in his misery, savoring the sweet taste of his comeuppance. "What's the matter, Derek?" I taunted. "Not so enamored with your precious Amanda anymore?" He fell silent, and I could almost hear the shame radiating through the phone. It was a delicious feeling, watching the man who had so callously discarded me squirm under the weight of his own mistakes. But as satisfying as it wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wanted to see Amanda brought to her knees to watch as her world crumbled around her. It was Owen who suggested taking things a step further, arranging a face-to-face confrontation that would force Amanda to confront the consequences of her actions. "Meet me at the old parking garage downtown," he texted me one night, the cryptic message sending a thrill of anticipation coursing through my veins. When I arrived, the dimly lit garage was deserted, save for a lone figure leaning against a sleek sports car. As I drew closer, the figure stepped into the light, and my breath caught in my throat. It was Amanda, her once flawless makeup smeared, and her eyes rimmed with red. She looked broken, a far cry from the poised and confident woman who had stolen my husband's heart. "You think you can just tarnish my image and get away with it?" she spat, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. "Oh, Amanda, this is just the beginning. You're going to lose everything you've schemed for." Her eyes widened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear cross her features, but just as quickly it was replaced by a steely resolve. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she hissed, taking a step closer. "I'll destroy you, Lily. You and anyone else who gets in my way." I held my ground, matching her icy glare with one of my own. "Bring it on, sweetheart. I'm not the one with a closet full of skeletons." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her seething in my wake. It was a small victory, but it was enough to fuel the fire burning within me. From that point on, the gloves were off. Owen and I ramped up our efforts, leaking more and more damning information about Amanda's sordid past. We exposed her financial indiscretions, her web of lies and manipulation, leaving no stone unturned. And as her world crumbled around her, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. This was justice, plain and simple, a reckoning for all the pain and humiliation she had inflicted upon me and countless others. But even as Amanda's empire crumbled, there was still one final piece of the puzzle left to fall. Derek himself. He had been my partner, my confidant, my everything. And in the end, he had chosen the path of betrayal, casting me aside like a worn-out relic. Well, no more. It was time for Derek to face the consequences of his actions, to see the true monster he had aligned himself with. And I was going to make sure he had a front-row seat to the destruction. The endgame was in sight, and I was ready to unleash hell. The day of reckoning had finally arrived, and I was ready to unleash hell upon Derek and Amanda. With Owen by my side, we had orchestrated a showdown that would bring their web of lies and deceit crashing down around them. It all came to a head at a pivotal company meeting where the board of directors and key clients had gathered to discuss the future of the business. Little did Derek and Amanda know, but Owen and I had been working behind the scenes, gathering support from those disillusioned by the scandal. As Derek took the stage, his cocky demeanor betrayed no hint of the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. Amanda sat in the front row, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer outfit a carefully crafted mask of confidence. But I knew better. I could see the cracks in her facade, the subtle signs of strain that belied her true state of mind. Derek launched into his usual spiel, waxing poetic about the company's bright future and innovative vision. But this time, his words rang hollow, falling on deaf ears. That's when I made my move. Rising from my seat, I cleared my throat and stepped into the aisle, commanding the room's attention with a single pointed glare. "Derek, Amanda, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room," I announced, my voice steady and unwavering. Derek's bravado faltered, his eyes widening as he realized what was happening. Amanda, too, seemed to shrink back in her seat, her perfectly painted lips parting in a silent gasp. "For too long, you two have been running this company into the ground with your selfish, unethical behavior," I continued, my gaze sweeping over the sea of stunned faces. "But no more. The truth is out, and it's time for you to face the consequences." With a nod to Owen, he sprang into action, queuing up a presentation that laid bare the sordid details of Amanda's past. The affairs, the lies, the financial misdeeds that had left a trail of destruction in her wake. As the damning evidence played out on the screen, the room fell deathly silent, save for the occasional gasp or murmur of disbelief. Derek's face had drained of color, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before my very eyes. Amanda, on the other hand, had risen to her feet, her eyes blazing with fury. "You think you've won, Lily?" she snarled, her voice dripping with venom. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed." And with that, she turned on Derek, unleashing a torrent of accusations and revelations that left him reeling. "You want to know the truth, Derek?" she spat, her words cutting through the stunned silence like a knife. "I'm not the only one with skeletons in the closet." What followed was a brutal evisceration of Derek's character, as Amanda laid bare his own web of infidelities, financial misdeeds, and unethical business practices. It was a scorched earth tactic, a desperate bid to salvage what little shred of credibility she had left. But it was too late. The damage had been done, and the once mighty Derek stood before us, a broken and disgraced shell of a man. As the truth came crashing down around them, the board members and clients began to turn on Derek and Amanda, their voices rising in a chorus of outrage and disgust. It was over. Their reign of deceit and manipulation had finally come to an end, and they had no one to blame but themselves. In the chaos that ensued, I caught Derek's eye, and for a fleeting moment I saw a glimmer of regret, a silent acknowledgement of the devastation he had wrought. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back. As Derek and Amanda were unceremoniously ushered out of the meeting, their once bright futures reduced to ashes, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction wash over me. Justice had been served and the scales had finally been balanced. It was a hard-won victory, but one that tasted oh so sweet. In the aftermath of Derek and Amanda's spectacular downfall, a strange sense of calm washed over me. It was as if a weight had been lifted. A burden I had carried for far too long finally cast aside. As I stepped into the role of leading the company, I felt a newfound sense of purpose and determination. No longer would I be content to exist in the shadows, sacrificing my dreams and ambitions for the sake of others. This was my time to shine, and I was going to seize it with both hands. One of my first orders of business was to implement the eco-friendly community housing project that Derek had always dismissed as a pipe dream. It was an idea that had been simmering in the back of my mind for years, a vision of sustainable living that prioritized the environment and fostered a true sense of community. As I unveiled the plans to the team, I could see the skepticism on their faces, the same doubt that had plagued me for so long. But this time, I refused to let it deter me. "This is the future, people," I declared, my voice ringing with conviction. "A chance to leave a lasting legacy, to build something that truly matters." And to my surprise, they rallied behind me, their initial hesitation giving way to a shared enthusiasm for the project. With each passing day, I could feel myself growing stronger, more confident in my abilities and my vision. Gone was the meek, subservient woman who had allowed herself to be pushed aside and belittled. In her place stood a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had stared adversity in the face and come out on top. It was during this time that I found myself leaning heavily on the support of Emma and Owen, my two closest allies in the battle against Derek and Amanda. "I can't believe how much you've grown, Lily," Owen marveled one night over drinks at our favorite haunt. "It's like you've finally come into your own." I couldn't help but smile, feeling a swell of pride at how far I had come. "It's always been within me, Owen," I replied, my voice tinged with a newfound confidence. I just needed to find the strength to let it out. As our eyes met across the table, I felt a spark of something unfamiliar, a connection that went deeper than mere friendship. It was as if, in the crucible of my personal war, a new bond had been forged, one that held the promise of something more. But I pushed those thoughts aside, content to simply bask in the warmth of Owen's unwavering support and the knowledge that I had finally found my footing. With each passing day, the wounds of Derek's betrayal began to heal, the pain and anger giving way to a sense of inner peace and strength that I had never known before. It was as if I had been reborn, emerging from the ashes of my old life like a phoenix, more resilient and determined than ever. And as I looked to the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and possibility. The world was my oyster, and I was ready to take it by storm. No longer would I be content to exist in the shadows, sacrificing my dreams and ambitions for the sake of others. This was my time, my chance to leave a lasting legacy and build something truly remarkable. And with Emma and Owen by my side, I knew that anything was possible. The road ahead was sure to be paved with challenges and obstacles, but for the first time in my life, I felt truly prepared to face them head-on. Derek and Amanda may have tried to break me, but in the end, they had only succeeded in forging me into a stronger, more resilient version of myself. And as I stood on the precipice of a new chapter, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the lessons I had learned along the way. The battle may have been hard-fought, but it was one that I had emerged from victorious. A warrior, a survivor, and a force to be reckoned with. The future was mine for the taking, and I had no intention of letting it slip through my fingers.